play, I guess, I'll have to find out between Southwest and Bessemer City. They played today.
Oh,
too,
okay.
Okay.
That's cool.
So I'll have to congratulate Coach Gibson when I see him.
Yeah.
Tomorrow night, we always
through and
congratulate Coach.
Figured out the
That's
things that we
funny.
were asking for, then
That's
rated
right.
them to Dan.
It's like I tell him, I said, you gotta congratulate Coach
I had no
because
idea about this
you guys are playing for him next year. You
Just-
need to be congratulated.
That's right.
Lots of spreadsheet experience
Yeah,
that
great.
doesn't
Well,
get
y'all
used
want to go
much
ahead and get
anymore.
started?
Yeah,
It's about
please.
10 after.
Sure.
Yes, actually 10 after.
I'm sorry, I can get my pen.
Let's see here. Make sure I don't make no mistake. Okay, we're live.
Stop talking. Oh, thank you. Good evening, everybody. We are going to go ahead and open up the meeting. And do we have the minutes that, I know I got them and I approved them, but we don't have a paper copy or
Anybody
to
else?
be ready to,
From last meeting,
yeah,
I don't have a paper trail.
we
okay.
didn't get them yet.
Okay. And I guess what we have to do is, the procedure is you're supposed to be able to go online to our conference and anybody can download them. So I guess you guys, we have to get you guys filled on how to do that. So we'll be sending you something on that to know how to do that. And you'll be able to download the agendas and everything, the minutes and previous minutes and everything from the iCompass website.
Right, but we will approve the minutes prior to posting them?
No, you can't, no, that's just for you to review it. You would download and review the minutes, and you would actually came back to this meeting here and approve it.
Okay,
Because that's the only way you can do it, you cannot do everything on.
okay.
We'll get everybody, so we'll send that to everybody. Yeah, we'll send that to everybody. Yeah, that's the procedure, it's gotta be, you would only be able to look at it, and then we only can approve it at the meetings.
Okay,
So,
I'm okay with that.
okay, so that's a step that we're missing, but we will get that to you. So it won't be approved to the next meeting. And actually, going by the calendar, this is supposed to be our last meeting until January, because, we voted on not to have one in November or December.
Oh.
And June and July, unless we just need to have a special meeting. We can, I don't have no problem with having a special meeting if needs be.
Will we need anything to review after this?
It's gonna depend on how fast we do it this meeting here.
Okay.
And it might be necessary to have another meeting after this, if we can't come to a conclusion. Or if y'all vote tonight and have somebody clear cut, then we don't need to meet again unless it's a special situation. But
Okay.
we-
Okay.
But we may need to
Sounds
meet-
like a plan.
may need to meet again anyway. But we can see, y'all, just let Leanna know and
Okay.
we can go from there.
Now, next on the agenda is public comment. So I don't think we have anybody signed up at this point
No, we
to
don't.
have public comment.
down the doors.
I do want to, I know our interviews start at 6:30. Is that right?
Right.
It's first group. So I do want us to kind of talk as a group regarding the gadabouts and our time with them. So I realize it's going to be a little bit longer with our interviews and things, but I certainly don't want to start now and then have to
Right.
stop and get
So we
ready.
table the discussion until after the interview?
Yeah, I think we'll just table it until afterwards so that we can just comment on that together as a group. So, is there anything that we can discuss with in preparation for interviews tonight before they start at 6:30?
I guess if anybody have any questions, just shoot the questions to us and let's see. Because we're only gonna have about 15 minutes to ask questions. And the way the format's gonna be, they're gonna have a 15-minute presentation, then we'll have 15 minutes of Q&A.
Okay.
So, anybody got any kind of questions they wanna ask, we can start with Dan.
No, we already talked about,
And Dan said
Yeah.
to the questions.
yeah, so I sent my questions out.
They looked
Yeah,
at
but-
us.
yeah.
Okay.
But according to ZIP, with the master plan that was presented here, as far as maintenance costs would not be included in that, nor would there be any revenues.
Fees, right.
Revenue fees inside. That would be discussion for us once the master plan is approved,
Right.
or once we select a
Can you shut
vendor.
that door?
Right, okay, good.
Yeah. Wait a minute, let me shut that door.
Okay, good.
Because of guys out there. And what I was telling Dan is, it was allocated $50,000 for this project, but we don't necessarily mean that we have to spend $50,000. So if we do come up, the total has been for the city of Gastonia and for Gaston County has been about $35,000 is what they spent on their master plan. So I don't know, and with the extra money, I'm saying that we spend 35 and have 15 left over, we may can allocate some to do a more in-depth study of operational or maintenance or whatever we deem, necessary. So once we just determine who the company is, and then we negotiate with them and see exactly what we can have in our master plan.
Okay.
So that's the way we're trying to get it set up. We're not trying to be cheap and save, a bunch of money. We got to get what's necessary, and a lot of questions, answer a lot of questions coming up for its maintenance and operations and things like that. So hopefully we can get enough bang for our buck to answer a lot of questions for us. And this is only this last study was done 10, 15 years ago, so this is the only chance for the next 10 or 15 years for the future of Belmont for this recreation. So we better have a pretty good plan coming here. So if it means us spending the whole $50,000 to get that done, then we'll get it done. But hopefully it will not. I'm not saying it, but we need to get some answers, and we need a direction for the future.
I'm curious if they have the ability to make this master plan and make it more of a living document that gets updated every few years as we go, or if there's any way to roll through some of the changes. If maybe we spend $35,000 to kick it off, but we have an agreement where they step in every couple of years and update a few things, whatever those might be, changing demographics, or that park's been built now, or that rec center's up. That way, 10 years from now, or 13 years from now, if we've missed a couple of years again, we're not kind of in this lurch where we don't have the master plan, can't go after grant money in some different ways, or whatever the case may be, and
You're basically not starting from zero.
Right.
yeah. I don't know if that's possible or not, but I'm curious if, I'm sure we're not the only ones that have that challenge, so I'm wondering how other towns.
Normally you do a master plan every 10 years, and like I said, I was ongoing 13 years. It's been missed for the last couple of years. I guess my only questions I'm going to be asking them is what kind of ratio do they have? They've done the part of grants. How many other companies were able to get, or cities were able to get part of grant money from the master plan?
Right.
That's one of my main questions.
That's
But I think I've seen one of the other studies where different groups were saying that they had a 60% rate of getting part of money based on the master plan. So that's what I'm interested in seeing. How successful with this master plan done in order for them to receive money from the state. And that part of grant is next year, coming up May the 31st, I think.
So we'd have to start writing that grant, like,
Right now, yeah. And then talking to the city manager, I don't know if we're gonna be as part of this gym or what phase is gonna be for the part of grant. It probably won't be this year, because they're looking at some other things for the part of grant coming up next year.
Zeb, I hate to interrupt you, but this company you said is now the new, what's their new name? Which one of these? Is it,
Benish.
Benish.
Yeah,
Okay.
Benish is the
Okay.
new
Used to
company.
be
Yeah, that's when we
Spike.
did our last one.
okay.
Used to be Frank.
So they have a lot of familiarity with the city, but, so we'll see. And I guess what my other question is, and based on looking at the old 2003-13 master plan, they had a ratio in there of how many residents for a gym. I think it was for one gymnasium for every 20,000 people. That was the ratio they used. I want to see if that's the same number that they're using now. I mean, in 10 years, we're probably going to have 20,000 people, but we still don't have a gym, and we really need one. And my other question is going to be is, that was identified that we needed a recreation center back 10, 15 years ago. Nothing was never done. How can we move forward with this? Because it's probably going to be the same results. People are going to want a gymnasium. How do we move from not getting a gym over 13 years ago?
yeah, it's kind of interesting how that can got kicked down the road.
Yeah.
I'd like to know.
That was because of the Stowe Y. Kind of our gym was that. So that's
It's
why
even in here, they
we
mentioned
Well, that
paid
and
$250,000, which we gave to the Y to create to the fields and to use at the gym. None of that occurred, so I think the mayor, a couple council meetings ago, actually got to the $250,000 back. So then that's why, because we were told as part of the Belmont that the Stowe Family Y was our rec center. And that never
At
happened.
a cost? I mean, that we would still pay membership fee for that, or?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, and I was telling Dan also, it was a bond that was passed 12 years ago, and the bond expired last year. November 7th of last year. And that bond was for 12 million, I think. And it wasn't necessarily for a recreation center, it was for
Was it 12 million?
facilities.
Facilities bond, though,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
right.
Remember
Yeah.
voting for it.
It was approved by voters back then, and that when it has expired.
But it was not executed, right?
Yeah, it was not executed, so
It was a bond action.
that's where we stand.
That's why, because of the stuff.
So moving forward, it's
Then
gonna
what
be
they
something.
found, that they couldn't put the fields because it was the floodplain. Well, then that's why
Yep,
we
okay.
never got fields, right?
Yep, yep, okay.
And I think Melissa's got a question, she's over here.
Well, we are interested that, and it will probably come out in the presentations on how they plan to engage the community in those
And
techniques.
the questions, yeah, and I think, Leanna, you had that in your questions, right?
You raised them in the questions, yeah.
And, you know, they might have similar answers and similar presentations, but one thing we could ask them is for them to tell us about a recent project that they've completed and what are the aspects of that, because as we look to, you know, parks, there's traditional and there's needs for all ages and
Yes.
all different types of uses. I think that would be interesting to hit on, you know, tell us some aspects. Is it like multimodal? You know, give us a little more detail about something specific that they've worked
Yeah,
on.
that's why I'm really interested in how they're gonna grab the data from the different demographics, because you're gonna get a little,
All over the map.
all over the map if you
Yeah.
get with the demographics. If the different demographics don't participate in it, then this could be skewed, so I'd like to get, if they can get a good sampling of all age groups, I guess.
Right. Yeah, that's one thing we'll be listening for, is how well do they get to know already Belmont, and how do they plan to get to know us, not just have, you know, national.
I don't want an
standards
online
in terms of,
survey.
Right,
You know.
Yeah,
I don't want an online survey, that's probably.
And
the
one of
worst
theirs,
thing.
they talked about
said
that
they
they
were
do
gonna
it by
mail
mail, do it by
Yeah.
social media.
Yeah, it was Spanish.
Phone
Spanish.
calls.
Yeah, Benish.
Yeah, they mail you a letter and then they
They-
call you and irritate the hell
they-
out of you until
they-
you return the survey.
For the 300, and they, kind of went through that here.
yeah, I wanna see, one thing, and like Brett was talking about, how they gonna use the information for us going forward. If it comes up that we need a splash pad, a gym, or a new park, or whatever, can we utilize this information to go forward with it? And that's gonna be very
And
important.
actually, your point's well, that they're taking about an update.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if
Yeah, I
that can be
think that
done,
the
or-
ones that, well, I mean, I
or
think
even
it
if we-
should be done. I mean,
Right.
it's kind of like a no-brainer.
Well,
You
I
write a
think,
report
go
10
ahead,
years
sorry.
ago, yeah, and things change, and I think that you should have a couple dollars back there under the table that you can.
Well, I think too, as trends just change.
Right.
I mean,
It's good.
we didn't talk about splash pads 10 years ago, so if we're talking about them now, what are we gonna talk about in 10
Right.
more years when
Right.
this finally, I mean,
Right.
I just know, like, going to several places or, being around with sports facilities and things, how they do phases, and it's almost like when they do phase 1, it's that trend, then you can say, oh, I saw that trend, and then by the time they're on phase 4, they're doing something out that they probably never had thought
Right.
they were doing, so that's always like a concern too, and especially when you put money into that, and then the trend changes, and then how can you recycle what that old trend was? Yeah, like, well, that was one
Yeah.
skate park, I mean,
That's in this
How
old
can you
study.
respond?
yeah, because when we went up to
change?
Hickory, that skate park, look, I mean, it just wasn't, as much, they just didn't use it as much and things like that, so, anyway.
Well, let me say,
I always talk about-
going back to the splash pad, it's scheduled for the splash pad, did I get that right, splash pad? I'm getting it mixed up, I think it's the amphitheater. Which one did he tell me? I'm getting mixed up. One of them, either the splash pad or the amphitheater is scheduled to be, for us to have concept is the amphitheater. We need to have the amphitheater in place, ready to run by July 1st, with what the design that we want. So that's one of our first projects to come up with.
Now, is that for
Stowe
Stowe, or
Park.
is that for Kevin?
It's
Okay,
for
'cause-
Stowe Park.
Because
okay.
Kevin Lofton has an amphitheater.
Yeah.
Right.
Natural, yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, we need to come up with a plan for Stowe Park amphitheater
Oh, is that
replacement for July 1st.
Oh, the gazebo, you mean?
The gazebo.
Oh, okay, okay, all right.
I got you.
But, yeah, I was
Yeah,
thinking,
Yeah, I'm thinking
They have like
amphitheater.
the concrete pad right now.
Concrete pad, yeah, and hopefully we're gonna
And you
be able
need
to
replacement.
expand that concrete pad. Right now, that's a 30 by 40.
Right.
We're hoping to go with like a 50 by 80
Okay.
pad to be able to have the amphitheater big enough to be able to house the
Gazebo.
bands and different
Yeah.
groups to come in there.
Okay.
So y'all be thinking on that concept also, so that's, I don't know if we need to put that, we know we're gonna be doing that project. Like I said, they want us to have something in place by July 1 of 2019. Sounds scary, don't it, 2019? But yeah, they want us to have something in place by the end, and that's in our CIP. And the other thing we're looking at is splash pad. I've looked at the price, Gastonia, some of the different areas, you're looking at like $310,000 for a splash pad. That's the cost.
Oh, we didn't budget nearly that much.
Well, that's what Gastonia spent on theirs. Now, Ranlow and some of the smaller towns, they did about 100,000. But that's the cost.
Where are they going to put it?
Right now, potentially at Kevin Lofton.
Okay.
And that may save us some money, the location, because you already got the restrooms, you're already close to a water source down there. You already got ADA sidewalks and things, so that may save us some money, so that cost could go down. So that's something else to be thinking about. So that's two projects right there, the amphitheater and the splash pad. And we are getting a lot of emails or things about taxes went up, and you had splash pad listed as one of your projects. Where is it? So that's some of the calls that we're getting right now about the splash pad. So those are two projects right there to be thinking about. It's about 6:30, so y'all think y'all are ready?
All right, everybody be careful against this cord.
Yeah.
Who's first?
How you say that? Finish. Finish. I always get that mixed up.
We have to say it 5 times fast.
Might go know something else, but.
Evan, come on up.
We got it all set up now?
Yep. Try to see if there's one of the mountain lists up here to help you. You can flash drive. And this is the finish group. And say your name.
I'm John Wood.
Hey, John, how are you?
With Alfred Benish, if you want to get the whole name.
Okay.
Doing all right. Anytime you can come over and not get stuck in the traffic. But then you have traffic in Belmont. So.
Hell, yeah.
Yes, we certainly do.
They're gonna pop up.
Let him get it. It pop up.
Pass it through this
Okay.
round. Set up position.
Sorry.
Yeah.
It's really focused.
The extra.
I'm keeping close notes.
Okay. Yeah, in case I miss anything. I've been doing quarter end stuff all week, so my brain's like. For the most part, he's doing about 5 or 6 hours. So he's pretty good as far as babies go. Yeah, yeah.
I can go ahead and start while we're figuring out.
Okay, I'm gonna say you got a backup plan.
I've been to these before where you have to have plans. I mentioned my name's John Wood. I'm a senior project manager, landscape architect with Alfred Benish, just across the river in Charlotte. And I've been with them a little over a year now, but I've got about 30 plus years. I don't like to figure out what that number is. 25 of those, and 28 of those, my wife reminds me, in Charlotte, working for a few other good landscape architecture firms. And part of my process has always been working in a lot of park and recreation environment, do a lot of comprehensive plans, a lot of site-specific plans. So we're, that's been my role when I slid into Benish. Benish used to be Site Solutions in Charlotte. Are you familiar with that firm? Derek Williams, if you remember him. So he retired a year ago. They wanted somebody with gray hair to come into his place. That's me. So after 20 years of being a competitor, well, I'd say that I was on the team. So kind of revamped a lot of the folks there, and we start, but there's still a lot of park and recreation projects. There we go. So I would manage this this endeavor, and I have a team that's with me that will be doing different things, from some of the mapping, a lot of data gathering, inventory, developing standards, public involvement. So the three boxes to the left are all part of Benish. So Kevin, Jeff, and Kirsten. And I'm actually going to add another guy who's an engineer, and you may wonder why, but he's a resident of Belmont. So I want to make sure he's in this process because he's been involved in a lot of our park projects, and apparently comes to a lot of the meetings here in town as well. So we'll make him part of that public involvement piece. Then I have one team member on in the submittals that you've read through. That's ETC Institute. And I put them on because I've worked with them several times to do the community survey part. They do a great job. They do stuff all over the country. They do quite a bit here in North Carolina. I've worked with them probably 5 or 6 times. They've written a lot of data and information and benchmarking with them, which certainly helps when we look at comparing demographics in towns of certain sizes, growth issues, and all those things. And then I have sort of a question mark up there for architect in between the submittal and tonight. Zip had called and asked about if we did things with recreation centers as part of it, because I know that's a major focus. And so I kind of left that in there because a lot of times in the system-wide plans, we're setting up the program and figuring out who wants what, so that we can then hand that program to an architect in a more master plan or detailed phase. But it may make sense to add an architect to the team. Boomerang is probably one in Charlotte I would add. We've worked with them before on several rec centers. I mentioned I bring a wealth of experience into this process. The 4 that are at the top of this column, so Benish on the left, ETC on the right. These are all currently underway. We're working with Cam Carpenter and Chuck Dellinger right now over in Gastonia on their plan. We've got the town of Waxhaw that we're getting ready to have our final public meeting on and wrap up that plan by the end of the year. And in Franklin County, and then out of that, the town of Lewisburg, which is the county seat, wanted to have their first master plan. So we have those sort of rolling in different phases. ETC is involved in the top 3, that's doing all the community survey piece. And then basically ones in yellow is where the more current ones that we work with. You can see ETC is doing a lot of stuff in the Carolinas as well. We're very familiar with Belmont and Gaston County. Going back to the 2003 plan, and I think is still the one in place, probably a little outdated by now.
Yeah.
We've had some different involvement at Stowe Park. Did the Gaston County plan back in 2017, of which this was part of. Doing some things in Dallas Park, Lineberger, Rankin Park over in Gastonia, and then we're even doing the new middle school here in Belmont. This was one of our other groups in Charlotte, and we've done some things with energy down at the South Point access. So spent a lot of time going to and from. I want to run through our planning approach. I said we're still sort of on this sort of 15-minute time limit, right? So I've got a few slides here, just sort of talk a little bit about how we approach this. And we're probably looking at a 6 to 8 month process. Is a fairly typical process when we're doing these types of plans to allow us to gather the right data. So we have a startup phase. That's where we're meeting with your staff, ZIP. We're meeting with this group here. We're exchanging that information. We're visiting all the parks, inventorying, getting to know some of them. You've got some nice new ones, but you've got some older ones that probably need a little more help and connectivity, and they're all loved different ways. We want to understand that. We'll start to do some mapping, because we do use a little bit of mapping in our process. It's not just a lot of text, but graphics. We want it to be a user-friendly document. We want it to be basically a working tool, living document, if you will, just to, we want to be able to update that as things change throughout the time. We'll set up that schedule, the budget, and a work plan that we'll check throughout the process. We do that facility assessment piece. So we're looking at not only your parks, but we'll look at other regional areas that folks here in Belmont and live on the fringes are using. We'll look at what you call your rec center right now, work center, but we know that we want to look at something a little bigger, hopefully in the future. And I don't know what it's the closest Y, is that Gastonia?
Still one.
Okay. We'll look at some of the private sector things. There's some things that are usually that are offered as well. We have a programming phase that we go through, and you can see we get a lot of input, not only from staff, this body, Vermont City Council. We'll have soon we'll have some stakeholders that we'll want to involve in Gastonia. We're going to do sort of focus groups with some of the different schools, hospitals, health department, seniors group, some of the organized folks, and we'll do those sort of separately, and then we'll do a public involvement meeting as well. It's more of a conversation, because we want to get as much input as we can. And so we have what we call community conversations. These are typically open format workshops or open houses. We'll bring in lots of imagery, lots of thoughts to start with. We do it 2 different ways. If the folks that come out and are interested, we'll get data from them in terms of what they like to do, how they like to recreate, what have they seen that they'd like to see here in Belmont, what are things that they think need to be changed. You gauge that. We mentioned focus groups. We're sort of educating each other. We're educating the public. They're educating us, because there's some trends that you see. And as we've certainly have discovered in the other communities that are growing quickly, Waxhaw being one, a lot of people coming in from elsewhere. So I was in Minnesota, and this is what we had there. I was in New York, this is what we had there. Does it make sense to put it here? That's what we have to figure out. We have the community survey piece, which ETC will, they'll provide some examples for whichever, if we have a steering committee, or if it's this group that we'll work with to kind of create that survey. They mail it out. They still do the old mail. It works pretty well. So we've shot typically for 300 to 400 completed surveys. They usually send out 10 times that to a database that will be the City of Belmont residents. And then they follow up, and there's usually an option to either send back that paper copy or to do an online through a link that they'll send. This makes it a statistically valid survey, which is what we want to have for particularly Partech askings down the road. The Survey Monkey and some of those we tend to shy away with. It's a little hard sometimes to figure out where your data is coming from. Gastonia is doing that for the plan. They've taken that on themselves instead of having a third party. So we're getting 300 or 400 responses. We just don't know how it's weighted. So usually we get twice the number at least, and then sometimes even more. So that's about a 3-month process. We look at your current issues. We'll come back with this group to help figure out what you think some of the goals and objectives need to be that we need to work on. We certainly have the 2003 plan that we'll look at and say, well, what has happened since in the last 15 years? What hasn't happened? And sometimes you're surprised by the things that have happened, whether it's an equitable distribution. When we come out of that, we start looking at recommendations not only for your existing facilities, but new facilities. We want to be careful how we approach new facilities, because that typically means more staff and more operating budget, and those go hand in hand. So want to make sure everybody's on board with that. Come back, we kind of flush that through with everybody again, and then go back to a second round of conversations to sort of present this data and get feedback. And we've been listening to everybody. It's sort of a gut check at that point. And then we get into the phased plan at the end, where what are some reasonable projects, how does it make sense? So we're not only looking at parks and facilities, but does it need to change some staff or add some staff, or there's some expertises we need to have? How does it fit into your capital budget? And what are those grant opportunities if you're looking for grants? Certainly in this part of the world, PARTF is the most popular one. But the trail work, Carolina Thread Trail is still a good source. There's still some LWCF funding out there. There's some other foundations that we've used to help kind of bundle and leverage, help communities build their parks. We'll also talk about some strategies in that plan. And I brought some samples that we've done, but I also like to point out that a lot of times we brought those plans, I like to put them in 3-ring binders so that you can add and subtract and pull things in and out. You see articles, you can put them in there to think about the future. In the community survey, these are just some of the examples of some of the data we'll get back. So this is actually from Waxhaw that we presented last month from that particular survey, looking at the folks that responded with their needs being met on a recreation piece. So at the top, the biggest things that came out on this particular survey were walking and biking trails, greenways, which can be somewhat different, some type of an indoor aquatic center, splash pad. Splash pads are moving up the rank right now on everything, and dog parks always sit up there in that process. And then programming, that's part of the survey, to look at programming as well. A lot of adult fitness, senior programs. The seniors are a big group as that sort of that age comes down, but the population goes up, and they're looking for those things they can do intergenerational. So we fold those into the plan. And there's a lot of things on the lists, and if this is the group to help put that list together that goes in the survey. It's about a 7-page survey. It takes about 10 to 15 minutes, and they get a lot of good data. The summary we get is very short, but the actual booklet we get is a little thicker. It has some of that other data that municipalities like to play with in other ways, besides just park and rec. In this one, we also asked about folks interested in investing, either through property tax increase or bonds, or somehow to help build some of these parks. Waxhaw did their plan in 2012, and their plan worked really well to get them a parks department, which they didn't have. They had everything set up and started to acquire some land. Demographics changed quickly, their growth changed quickly, and they realized they needed to do another plan fast to try to keep up with all that. So that's why we're doing another one now. ETC also helps us as we start to benchmark and figure out what our ratios are. We can use the National Park standards. They don't always work for everybody. They're not always up to date. And then we certainly have a lot of the standards we have from places we've worked. We kind of combine all that to determine what we need and maybe what you're good on, what you might need 10 years down the road as we start looking ahead. The plans nowadays seem to be good for that 5 to 10 year range. Usually somewhere in that 5 to 7 year range, you're probably looking at updating if you're not doing it constantly. PARTF really doesn't, to get the points in the PARTF, you need a plan that's 10 years or younger. So that's why we try to do these. Kind of gleaned just some current objectives and issues that I think a lot of these affect a lot of the communities that are going through growing pains. Some of these are just things part of this gets asked in that survey process as well. Particularly, what recreation does Belmont want to offer? You may have some things that people want, but Gaston County or Gastonia or Cramerton or somebody else is going to offer it that's not too far away. So working on a partnership, things that we'll delve into to make it work for both parties and put your money somewhere else. connectivity is a popular one that comes up in a lot of our plans. We're going to help take these objectives, work with you to create some other objectives so that we can actually attain doable recommendations in our plan, not just pie in the sky that you can never really check. You want things that you can look at every year and say, yeah, we did that, and we did that, and we did that. And feel that you're getting bang for your buck. Obviously, recreation is an important thing here in Belmont. Looking at the whole list of projects that are part of the property tax increase proposal, more than half of them have to do with recreation. So that's exciting to see that there are a lot of folks thinking about the need to improve your quality of life, recreation opportunities. Just a little bit I got while I was in town tonight, a number of cyclists and walkers out. Every park had folks at it, so that's good. That's probably all they're waiting for the traffic tonight after.
Viking's faster.
So as I mentioned, typically our process is about 6 to 8 months, as outlined in our schedule here. That first month, we really spent a lot of time getting to know each other, getting to know your system and operations, get to know all the parks in a lot more detail than just stepping out of the car and looking at them. And then that month 2 to 4 is where we start to get in, already pulling the public in, the community to talk with them. Notice on the community survey, there's that 3-month block in there, so you can spend a month crafting it. And then we have a month where it's getting mailed out, ETC's following up, we're getting all the data back, and then we have a month where it's all being put together so we can come back and present all that information. In Waxhaw, we present to the Park Advisory Committee, and then next week we're presenting to the town board the same presentation so that everybody has the same information on that. You're what, about 12,000 right now? In that? In Waxhaw is around, for everything from 12 to 17. I think we're in that 15 range, but they know they're going to be probably 25,000. Senior growth is going to keep going up as you develop south, particularly. And I want to be prepared for that. We're very familiar with grants. We do several a year for different municipalities. We think that helps give another level of experience into the planning process because we want to make sure that the plan we produce can help gain you some points on your PARTEF. So I've listed several of the agencies here that we've gotten grants for. This doesn't have the latest one that came out a couple weeks ago when they awarded the grants in September. We had 4 or 5 on that list too that we either did comp plan for, master planned it, or wrote the grant for. So it always feels good to help folks get some additional money and see these things come to fruition. So we've covered a lot of information quickly, because I want to be cognizant of our time. I'll bring in 35 years of park experience into this. Jeff Ashbaugh, who I already had on listed, he brings another 30 in, and I've got staff of 4 or 5 others who have been heavily into parks. So we bring that. ETC does community surveys, not only for parks, they do community surveys. So testing the health of communities and testing the health departments. So they bring that for several years of doing that around the country. We use a lot of different methods to get the information that we're looking for. That's why we like to get out and talk with folks and do it more in the open house format so that we can talk one-on-one. It's tough to do a presentation and get that one person who's anti-parks show up and want to dominate the dais all night long. We'll take that person's side and we'll talk about it. Had some communities that actually put that person in the Parks Advisory Committee. That's worked out. ETC, I've already talked about them. We also understand the grant process, which I think is important if any community is looking to move forward with development. sure I covered it, or
You covered a lot of
you're ready to go to sleep already from the check.
Well, you've answered a lot of the questions that we had.
Yeah, he did,
Well, I was checking them off, so.
Okay.
I have a question. So when we talk about surveying, because obviously you guys have done this many, many, many times, when you're looking at survey questions, do you customize that based on what our community already has? Like, for example, if you're asking about senior programmings, do you say, you currently have these things, but is there something different you would like to see? Or do you guys just have like a standard survey and everybody's like, okay, do we need, what's your interest kind of thing?
No, it
Is
gets
that-
customized.
Okay.
for a community.
And what
Because
is,
If you do a countywide, that's a whole different
Right.
survey than if you do City of Charlotte, which is
Right.
different than Gastonia, which might be different than Belmont, so.
You mentioned, I didn't hear the number correctly when you mentioned it, but you said that ETC sends out surveys. They're looking to get 300 to 400 back to have the sample, I believe, but I wasn't sure, how many do they send out? Was it
3,000?
okay.
3,000 or 4,000.
I couldn't remember if you said 10X or 3 or 4X or something.
They did 3,000 in Waxhaw, we got almost 700 back.
So,
Franklin County, we're getting ready to do that. That whole county population is 66,000. That's a lot of rural, so it'll be interesting to see what we get there.
and you mentioned Gastonia is
Gastonia
doing
did
the
their
Survey
own
Monkey.
Survey Monkey, yeah.
Yeah, Gastonia, because they're doing more of an update. Well, it's an update, but it's actually kind of a redo, because the plan they did in 2005 was a very detailed, thick plan of everything they had and what they wanted to do, but it wasn't really kind of a document that you could work with, which they admit. So they've done all the inventory. We gave them the templates, they've done all the inventory, and they're doing a survey. The survey will probably work if they want to go after part-tech, but we need to make sure that we're asking the right questions about, that we're not slighting different people. We have the demographic piece in there, and so that's why we kind of like this format.
Okay. And you touched on the idea of a living document, a master plan that would continue. I was curious, is there, we're looking to do this with our old plan that's a few years out of date now. How do we make it a living document? Is that something, do we engage you now to create the master plan potentially? And then do we have some other addendum that provides for a little continued work every year or throughout the years or every few years or something like that into the future? Or is there a way that it gets?
Certainly possible.
Okay.
One of our goals or recommendations that we put into our plans is to have this group get together every year and go back through everything and say, are we still headed in the direction that we thought we were headed, or do we need to make a change for something? Whether there's, you put in a splash pad and you got so many people, do I need to look at something else? Or in Waxhaw, it was interesting, one of the images we put up was an outdoor challenge course, and people just latched onto that, because they said, we're tired of driving to the Whitewater Center. We'd like to have something here, and that would be a niche that they don't have anywhere in Eaton County, or Lancaster in South Carolina, so they could kind of create something and have everybody come to them. So those are the kinds of things, some of the trends that change, and you certainly have a lot of new developments go in. I know we did Monroe's plan twice, once in 2002 and then updated it in 2015. And in 2002, it was because downtown was the center, theoretically, but you had all this growth that was way off to the northeast going towards Charlotte. So suddenly that's where the facilities really needed to be headed. And then once they got those in, the plan in 2015 was about how do we expand our existing facilities and how do we get an identity? They had no identity in Monroe. So just different things change as we got into plans sometimes and partway through and say, now, why are we doing a plan? Everybody seems to be happy with what you got, and so you change the focus even midstream sometimes about what you're doing.
To follow up on his question about this being a living document, you mentioned that it would come back to the board and we could actually change some things. In that process, that would then go to council for them to make the approval to keep this document alive.
If that's how you're set up, yeah, because I would think this group would accept it or adopt it, there's different words everywhere, and then you would send it to the council, so that, because that's also part of your part-time process.
Right.
And then however that's approved, if you have administrative approvals or things of that nature.
And the only other question I got is, I know you did the last master plan, and it was recommended for a gymnasium, and that fell through the cracks. So how do you see that happening? Why made that happen? Because that was approved by bond, and we still don't have a center. I mean, what recommendations would you give to us if this comes up that we need a gym or a splash pad or whatever, to kind of keep this thing alive itself and possibly get the project done this time?
Well, you hope that some of that comes through the public involvement process, that you have enough interest and enough buy-in with your community and all the boards, that you've got those voices that can keep the momentum going. I can do only so much, not being a resident of Belmont. But we can certainly, continue to send information about communities that have been successful in doing things. Those kinds of things I like to stick in binders as well, to make sure that we can see where it's been done elsewhere and how they approached it. We can talk about splash pads, and you need one here or here. We can give some general parameters in terms of those costs, because they vary all over the place. I've got one in Pineville right now it's around $350,000. I've got one in Sanford that actually they took it and added to it without me knowing about it, and they're up now $500,000 to $600,000 for that splash pad, because they want it to be a central destination. I think we've got one going into Dallas Park that was probably in that $250 range. So a lot of it has to do with what you want that to be, put it in. Same thing with Community Rec Center. And that's part of why we want to look at the programming out of here, because you can do a 2-meeting center, you can do a 12-meeting center.
John, speaking of, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Speaking of programming, so when you go in and you do your data research and you're pulling all of this information, do you also do you conduct an audit of the current programs that we have? And does that also include the amount of staff that ZIP has also? Because I think that's important to take into consideration in terms of part of the recommendation being we need more staff for this, what the programs we currently have versus what the recommendation could be.
Or do you enter into a third party? There are a lot of communities, like Harrisburg being one, and we're doing a park renovation expansion. There's a big building on the master plan that they gave us, and now it appears the YMCA has stepped up over there, and they're going to build their Y and up this park, and then trade off some space with the town for their park and recreation and community rooms. Which means they're going to want space in their town hall where they all work. But, so in Monroe couldn't even get a YMCA there, but they set up their own aquatics fitness center, did an enterprise fund, took out a construction loan, and then they couldn't stop the applications from coming in, and they paid that thing off. They've expanded it 3 times since 2001. Now they're still there out of again. They put a whole outdoor pool, and they showed the why you should have come here in the first place, because they're drawing from Holton, they're drawing from Charlotte, they're drawing from all over.
Have you ever seen any joint facilities with libraries, hospital wing, a clinic or anything like that as far as working with a rec center?
Actually, the Monroe Fitness Center, I think it's Novant, has a little wellness area within that, so they can at least have a nurse on duty, but they do blood pressure checks and a lot of the typical basics for people coming in and out. I've seen we've had libraries, actually the library in Harrisburg Park.
Dan, you got it.
Yeah, I think my question's more around, I'm going to step back because Bree kind of touched programs. That's fine, that's fine.
We're on the
Good
same
question.
wavelength.
But I want to go back and talk about the survey. What is typical in your average return? What's the typical ratio amongst the demographics? And I'm talking age groups. Do you tend to see more replies in 20 to 30 age group, 30 to 40, what have you, and less maybe on the senior, or do you see more from the senior side? And that's where I'm going to get at, because I think it's key to try to get as a bigger as a response across the demographics to really see what our needs are. Sometimes when you mail it out or do an online survey, people have busy lives, or they look at this and it's, oh well, here's this and it goes in the trash, or here's this. So I'm kind of curious as to that community, what was it, the workshop or forum that you have where the people
Community
come?
Conversation, I borrowed that term from Greensboro, because that's how they call them up there. It's interesting, and I can use Waxhaw, which passed around now, where we had probably a lot of folks in that 30 to 50 range
Yeah.
that answered that survey. Some on the other ends of the spectrum, and obviously some, you could list at least that they have kids in the household. We ended up doing 4 of the workshops at different times of the day. We did 2, one was out at a park, one was at American Legion, one was at a church, one was just out in the middle of downtown Waxhaw. We tended to get more seniors at workshops. And the one at the park was tied in with a July event, so we had a lot of kids and families that came as well, because they had other activities. So there were some things tied with each of these that we got slightly different responses. So the ones that we did the workshops on, a lot of those interests were more on the adult and senior programming and things to do with their grandkids. And then the survey that passed the assessment around honed in on a lot of the other facilities. They all sort of tied together when we compared the data. It was just a slightly different way of getting there, which is why we kind of do both options, plus do the focus groups if we have a chance, so that we don't have all the swim club answering.
Right, my biggest concern is the data getting skewed one way or the other without getting a full sampling, so.
Do you guys conduct those surveys? That's not done by a third party, right? That would be done.
ETC.
No.
Oh, it's the third
Surveys,
party. Okay,
third
it is.
ETC.
Okay.
Because that's just a lot of paperwork.
Absolutely.
Now, you did mention that Gastonia did their own survey, right?
Gastonia,
The Survey Monkey.
they had one on during the summer, and then we closed it.
Mhm.
And then when we had sort of our kickoff with their committee, they said, well, we want to put that back on. And now they put it back on, it closes next Friday, and I think they got another 200 responses.
Okay.
And they're tabulating all that data.
One quick last question for me. It mentioned in your example, the projected timeline, it shows the facilities inventory analysis takes a couple of months. ZIP's just wrapped up an inventory for Parks and Recs in general, and we're curious as to how that might be integrated into the information that you need, or if we have to repeat the whole thing again, because it looks like it would take 2 months, so.
It's good information, because like I said,
Okay.
Chuck and Cam are doing the one in Gastonia,
Mm-hmm.
and we gave them some templates that had maybe some more in-depth questions.
Right, there might be follow-ups or
We've got
something.
a
maybe.
binder that Chuck did over there that's just huge. It's the driest thing I've ever read. But down to how many folding chairs they have in the closet over the corner. So this one simplifies it a little bit, so that we even take that inventory and simplify it into more of a narrative. So we've got some images and some maps in there, and then the highlights, so that anybody can pick up that plan, submit that plan for a grant.
See what's
They're looking at 80 to 100 projects, they gotta be quick and pick up the highlights in there. And, so they're providing us all that data, and then we're still gonna go out for probably a day and look at specific areas that they wanna make sure we see. And over the course of the project, we'll probably get to everything, but we wanna make sure we get the highlights.
One good way to wrap up is there a project that you've done recently specific that you're proud of? And then we can look at the aspects of that.
In relation to.
Well, like a
comp
parks
plan.
and recreation project.
Well, I was gonna say the most recent comp plan I got that's completed would be, I did City of Monroe and both their Park and Rec plan and a Greenway plan. We did those simultaneously. So those finished up. It's been a few years, but because I had a gap there where we weren't doing a lot of system-wide planning, we were just looking for anything else, so we did a bunch. But that particular one helped get Monroe, get the Parks and Rec department of identity. Because it was interesting, their office is at the back end of the building where the fitness center is, but nobody ever connected them. They thought the fitness center, everybody thought the fitness center was a private organization. So they're going out, they put a logo in, they've gotten information out in different ways. Greenway's going now, they've got people back using their parks. And they put money into the parks that they own versus the ones they were trying to build new. Just to show that we've got some neighborhoods that need some park. We're doing a lot of that, a lot of park renovation. Parks were built in the 60s and 70s. things we look at. We look at it through crime prevention, through environmental design is one of the things we look at when we're doing inventory to see why is the park not being used. It's pretty evident a lot of times.
I know, Melissa, I know we're almost done, and I can cut my 2-question thing down to one. So, one of the things that being on the board for a little while, of course, a hurdle is being able to take a master plan and tell the city, like, okay, this is what we need. So, obviously, money is a big topic of how to get these things done. Do you guys, when you're looking at this and obviously collecting data, will you also help in prioritizing that? Like, we know as a board, we've been talking about, a gymnasium for a very long time. So, you made a comment about tax money going off these, Parks and Rec, a lot of it going to that. That's because those things have been sitting on a CIP list for a really long time. And my real thing is that when we talk about this, and you got in your program meetings about meeting with the council and staff and things, is to really understand the support level that's going to come back after all this is done. And so your help with prioritizing those things, saying, this is the need, but this is our analysis, this is what it's going to cost, but we can get from grant money. It's almost like making sure that the city understands the bottom line to say, this is what we really need, and kind of help prioritizing those projects that.
Yeah, well, we want to show phasing in there. And we want
Right.
to show kind of those steps because, well, to show good faith with the community, it's pretty easy to go hit the low-hanging fruit right away. But somewhere down there, you want to be, like we're working on a rec center, you want to have pieces going on at the same time while you're hitting all these other things and checking them off. So we get some programming and what we think we want in the community center. Right away, we want to start either identifying land, if we don't have it, and start thinking about land acquisition. We want to start master planning it. Usually I like to put something in so that every year you're doing a phase of a project. So maybe you're acquiring land for something, and then you look down the list and say, okay, 2 years from now I'm master planning it, and 2 years from now I'm doing the detailed design, and then when you're master planning, you're doing detailed design for something else, and you're doing something already on the land. So it keeps going.
Okay.
And then hopefully you're doing it around the community, so that somebody says, why don't we have anything in the southeast?
Yeah. Okay.
That's what I get asked to.
Thank you.
Well, we thank you a lot.
Yeah, thank you,
Good job.
John.
Close that out. Just about pull it out. Feel free to, if you think of other things while open the zip, have an email. I'm sure you'll see the process.
Will this board will make a recommendation to city council, and the city council will make their final recommendation? All right, we appreciate it.
Thank you, John. Have a good evening.
Your next is land design.
Yeah. Y'all want a minute or?
No.
No.
Rock on, baby.
We've had dinner, we're ready to go.
Just nothing.
Oh, yeah. Just like hungry. All right, so it's not surprising.
So, right here?
Right here.
So I'm putting this in.
Yes. She happy, Melissa happy.
Okay.
Hot flashes.
You just carry them around with you?
Stylish. One in my desk, one in the car, one in my purse. Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, wait.
I need to keep them all over the house while Pam turns the air conditioning down to like 67. I'm like, just grab that fan.
Yeah, man, this is making a big difference.
You know what she'll say? She'll say, get that fan and fan.
That's where it goes.
Give me a little bit of practice.
Know me, I push back. No, I'm not doing it.
Not doing it, come on.
It's up, that's why they said just inject it. I was thinking it was lying. Another one?
It'll come.
So, while we're waiting for that, we'll go ahead and introduce ourselves. That's okay. Is there another way of doing this? You're not introducing yourself? Well, I'm Beth Cody with Land Design. I'm a landscape architect that leads and directs a studio of public open space in our Charlotte office. And we have Brad Chambers with us with Kelly Group. Do you want to tell me who you are?
Well, I'm Brad Chambers with Kelly Group. Moved to Charlotte a couple of years ago, but my background far and away has been as a Parks and Recreation Director, so I know a lot of the challenges and issues that the city deals with on a daily basis, and I've worked in large cities and small cities and did it for about 30 years or so. The city I was in the longest, by the way, was Cookeville, Tennessee, where I was director for 13 years, and Cookeville's just right at the same size as Belmont. It's a university town like Belmont is, so can relate, I think, a lot to the size and scope of the department. And I've said this more than once, that I've been on that side of the desk, and I kind of know what some of the issues are, so hopefully I can help, particularly from an operational standpoint, management overview, taking a look at the nuts and bolts of an operation of the department.
So we work together. I am Land Design. We're civil engineers, landscape architects. We also do a lot of private development and public development. We have been working in Belmont on the rail trail for several years. So we were part of the original feasibility study when it was Caroline Thread Trail and looking at what side of the tracks that the rail trail should go on. And we're currently working with the Moffett Nickel, who were doing this replacemaking and landscape architecture of the rail trail. So we have been involved in Belmont for a while, know the community pretty well, have had several public meetings as it relates to the rail trail. So this is the main group right here, so I will be leading it. Again, really focused on open space planning, so sort of the physical space of things. And then Brad really helps with the operations and management of parks. He comes from a total different perspective from me, the programming side of that, and how operations work really well together. And supporting us with Land Design, we have Vedika, who's a GIS guru and planner, and then also we have Mac, who helps a lot with a lot of the open space projects. He's a designer as well as a planner. So these will be your main team members. And at Land Design, we really believe that parks and open space are super critical to how a community comes together. We really value public open space, and we think that it really creates the building blocks. And I think about Belmont, and I think about your rail trail coming, I think about Stowe Park, I think about your riverfront. Those are the things that really are the front, the face of your community. So it's not just the physical side, but also the recreation and the programmings that you have really help bring people together, and we think it's super important in creating a healthy community. So the things that we think about that are really important in terms of parks and recreation in your department are, of course, the active and the passive recreation that you have, the open space, the preservation, so where you sit in the world along the Catawba River or along the South Fork, that's super important in terms of preservation. But also all your facilities, the programmings, the events, the greenways that are coming along, and just the cultural resources and the cultural experiences that they provide. So just a little bit, so Brad and I are working right now in Salisbury, and we have a public meeting coming up next week. And this is very similar, we think. We've sort of based this on our experience there right now. The process can be anywhere as short as 6 months to 9 months. It really depends on the scope and how quickly you need to move, and what else you have going on that you might need to parallel. So if you already have existing community events that we think would be really important to utilize as ways of getting public feedback, we might want to do it around that. So our first phase is really the inventory and analysis, which I'm sure you're familiar with, but that's understanding, and I know we understand that you guys are going to be able to do some of the inventory, or that your staff is going to do some inventory. But understanding what you have and how it works and how it meets standards and how it meets the needs of your community is super important, so that overlaps with the community input. I also understand that you're planning on doing the survey, so supplementing that with public meetings and community input is really important, so that we are making sure we're getting a really good reading on what's important to Belmont. And then as part of that also, we start looking at some of the implementation strategies. What are our recommendations about what you need to do, and finishing up in the third phase with the final plan and the adoption. Anything you want to add to that?
I'll just throw out that standards and trends, specifically two of the departments that I was director of were CAPRA accredited departments, which I'm sure you know what that is, but the CAPRA standards are pretty rigid. Charlotte-Mecklenburg is a CAPRA agency, but there are only about 200 in the United States. But the fact that there's a long set of criteria that the council looks at when they come and do an accreditation visit is really valuable, whether or not you actually make the accreditation, just to know what all the standards are that have been set. And so those are some of the standards that I'll be looking at. Not that you have to meet CAPRA level, but are you meeting, are you trying, are you at least getting close, or have you just totally ignored? I'm not saying you have, but those are the kinds of things that you want to look at from a...
It's good to understand those standards, even if you're not striving to meet that, but if you're on the path there.
Trying.
Every day.
Yeah,
That's good.
Trying.
That's good. We help Union County achieve that. So right now, what we're looking at in Salisbury, which I think is a good model, is really 2 community meetings and then final plan adoption. But that's, some people want more community meetings, but I think 2 is sufficient. We also look at the steering committee or the advisory committee along the way, and that's what you're seeing at the bottom. Right now, the key dates that they're coming in or you're coming in and reviewing what happens, what we're presenting to the public before it happens, and also being ambassadors to spreading the word about what this plan process is and making sure that you're getting good involvement from the community. So just a little bit about the inventory and analysis. Part of that, again, is looking at the standards and trends, like Brad was saying, and understanding where you fit in compared to others. We think it's really important to have a plan that is unique to Belmont, but you still need to use that as sort of a benchmark and understand where you are. We also look at we think it's a good idea to look at other communities that are similar in size and similar in geography, or that might have a university of the same size, a historic downtown, to look and see how you compare to them, and if there's anything to learn from them, and even become sister communities to start sharing information. That's really good. And then we want to look at access, like are your programs, are your parks, are they accessible? Is there equitability throughout the community in terms of people being able to utilize your system? So the inventory is really building off of what you already have or what you're doing, as I understand, and making sure that we understand that and looking at them and understanding how they are functioning, how they are maintained, and how they are being used by the community. And again, the precedence community, looking at a similar town and comparing, and usually we look at 2 or 3 because some are good at some things and some are better at other things. So really, what are the things that you're wanting to focus on, and then it helps us decide what communities we might want to shadow.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Where is this amphitheater or gazebo located?
This one is in Georgia. This is in Decatur.
Okay.
You like that? And then just understanding, again, the rules of thumb. Where do you stand compared to other communities and compared to national standards? We also like to look at standards for small towns that are a little bit different.
And North Carolina. North
Yeah.
Carolina has its own set of data, so actually comparing apples and apples, when you look at the North Carolina data, and the Recreation Resources Services under the NC State has a pretty healthy data inventory that we're looking at. So we look at both national at the NRPA level and North Carolina level.
And then this is sort of an access map. Where are your parks located? Who's able to get there with a quick walk or a longer walk, and who's able to drive there? So what are the gaps, and where do we need to focus if that's one of the goals, is to make sure that everyone has, most communities right now, the goal is walkability. Now, I'd imagine in a town like Belmont, that's something that you want people to be able to walk to a park or an open space. Because that's why a lot of people are moving here. That's why people are choosing to stay here. So we will look at that. Do people have access, quick access to open space? So another key thing, this is about community input, that we think we really pride, no plan is the same, right? We don't know what your goals are necessarily. We don't know what your plan's going to be about. And so the public input and the stakeholder input and you guys being the advisory committee being on there, this really helps us working with staff understand what are the unique needs of Belmont, and then we adapt to that. So we want to make sure that when we're getting public input, that we're reaching out in various ways. The survey is critical, but also how are we talking to people? We think it's really important it's fun to have walkabouts, to have meetings where at some point you can meet outside also and do a walking tour, but inside is a more traditional open house public meeting that have boards. So you couple those together so you can do walking tours, but also inside community meetings are great. This is one in Gastonia. And some of those images are from, the top left was from the some of the rail trail meetings that we have, and then walking on the corridor. So we also really enjoy public meetings, and we want to make sure that what we're getting when we're getting feedback, that people are enjoying doing that. So we really like to make exercises that are interactive, thoughtful, and really meaningful. So we're not just asking general questions, but we're asking for people to think about what they want to see here and have them interact in a way that's fun to put up notes and to vote on things and think about how this community can be in the future. That was from Waxhaw. So we have lots of different things that we do, and sometimes it's these nice little playing cards that people can pin up and think about what they want the future of their park system to be. But we really want to make sure that we're getting input also from a wide range of folks, so even kids are super important. And then working with you on your survey. I think it's important to make sure that the survey can be used for the future, for having, to make it more likely that you'll be able to get a grant. You know, the surveys are super important to be done right and done correctly, and that you're getting good information. And it really helps balance the information that we're getting from community meetings, because we all know certain folks come to community meetings. So the survey is really important. And then our final step is really looking at the recommendations. So the recommendations are a variety of things from the system, like what does the physical system look like, and then what are the program recommendations that we're going to be making, and then the operations and management, how are the staffing, the budget, the future, the growth of this community, how is that going to be managed, anything that we're recommending in terms of The addition of facilities, how is that going to be maintained and operated in the future? And then we come up with an action plan that really looks at immediate goals, like within the next year, and the midterm goals, which might be up to 2 to 5 years, and then long-term for the next 10 to 20 years, and making sure that we're looking at who's responsible for doing those. So this is an example of sort of from another project, from an action plan. But in there, it sort of describes what it is. It's hard to see it. So a projected monetary value that might be associated with that, if there is something like that. Some of them don't have cost. And if there's any potential funding partners that might help with that, but also having some, is it a park and rec staff? Is it a commission member who's responsible for that? Who's responsible for making sure that happens? And then this is just an example of, this was from Waxhaw, looking at what your different communities, your different park systems are, and are the naming, or the level of service, how you have them defined right now. Are they appropriate? Are they an appropriate definition for your town, or do they need to be changed? And then looking at access in the future and where your gaps are and where do you need future parks. So in here we're looking at where they need to place new parks, where they need to have new greenways, and trying to ensure that there's good coverage. So that's pretty much our process. I'd be happy to talk about that a little bit more detail. I'm going to take a break and take a call from fighting a cold. I can feel I'm getting ready to start coughing.
Any questions?
So I'm curious how you approach the sample. I know I'm asking partly just because of the little telephone icon in the slide. Are you mailing, calling, using internet, social media, all of the above, others?
For typical for the projects that we've worked on, we have used phone. We use public policy polling, which is we don't do it ourselves, so we have a group that's just all they do. And we've had very good results with them. So they make sure that it is statistically valid. They balance that and they give us the results. They do, it's robocalls. It's quite affordable for them to do it that way, and they still get really good results.
Do they get, I'm curious, do they demographically have more pickups for people my age or older? I'm thinking my kids would never pick up the phone, for example. It's a changing thing. So
right.
And how do you fill in the gaps? I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying different means might be needed for different segments of the population.
So we've used this very recently. I mean, we just used this on Union County, and those were the questions that were raised. I'm not sure exactly because we sort of rely on them to do that, and I thought you guys were doing your own survey, but we're using them again for Salisbury. And I don't know exactly, is it because cell phones are now part of the database or not? But they do make sure that it is demographically balanced, because it has to be statistically valid within a certain area.
Plus or minus 5%.
Will this, after you finish this master plan, would this be sort of a living document for us to use?
So living document, and that you can edit it, or you want to make sure that you're being held accountable?
That we can edit it?
Both, actually.
Both, yeah.
As an example, our current plan is
13 years old.
Yeah, it's out of date, and so we can't use it, and we don't want that to happen again. So we're, is it possible for us to create the master plan and then set it up where we can keep it updated on a regular basis every year, every few years, some range of time, so that we've got an ongoing.
Well, I think that we would hope that any document that we prepare is something that is relevant and useful and does not sit on a shelf. And we do here, especially with the action plan, we're making sure that those are giving you steps and things that you need to be checking off. You guys are helping them be accountable for. But how that actually works in terms of editing it, right? If you think about that. I think what would be great, these documents are usually put together in a program called InDesign, which I doubt you.
I'm familiar with it.
Okay. So you can have the InDesign document if you want it. But another thing
Not
I
really,
think is
but-
to have a separate document, an action plan that is in like in a Word or an Excel spreadsheet, so it can easily be translated and easier for lots of people, in case you decide it's better.
Yeah, no, I don't necessarily really want to be the one to edit the master plan and InDesign, but.
Right.
yeah.
So I think that there can be pieces of it that are pulled out and put into a Word document or an Excel document that's easy to help track progress and change goals, right? Sometimes, you know, right now, you might set a goal that you want to make sure that you have 2 new staff people by 2020, and maybe you end up getting 3. And things do need to be able to be changed, and directions can be changed, or opportunities can come up. I'm sure you want to add to that.
I know when I was a director, that's exactly what I wanted. I wanted a plan that I could pull off and use. It's a waste of time and money and resources and everything else to go through the process that any master plan takes, and then put it on the shelf, and the only reason you have it so you can go get state grant money. That just never made sense to me. So I always wanted to have a plan. Matter of fact, the very first master plan I ever did, we did it in-house just because I wanted it to be something that we're going to use as a staff on a continuous basis. And I told Beth this about Salisbury, that I want it to be something that they use, and I would want this to be something that you guys use, that it's a continuous thing. And, you know, adding to the comment about things can change. If you did a master plan and started it in 2008 and finished it in 2009, by 2011, that is fundamentally a different plan than it was in 2009. So you have to have that ability to come back and take a look at it and adapt and have it make sense. So, absolutely.
Is there a project that's like an on-the-ground park or recreation project that you can tell us about, and certain aspects that you're proud of?
Well, one of the projects, on the ground, Little Sugar Creek Greenway, I did the master plan for that for the 15 miles, and then we did the design for the urban section, so the part that goes between CPCC Community College to Moorhead, if you're familiar with that. So we're metropolitan. So that was one of my favorite all-time projects. We just recently helped the Friends of Hickory, just on a whole different scale. Friends of Hickory do the children's park that's in the downtown area of Hickory. So there's Union Square, and right next to it is a brand new children's park. And then at a larger scale, Ramir Bearden Park is a park that Land Design has worked on. So we go from really big and shiny to really small. And I can tell you, I so enjoyed working in Belmont and with Adrian and the rail trail, especially. We started that in 2011. So it was really, I really enjoy working in small towns. I enjoy working in Belmont. We don't have anything built yet, but it will happen soon.
Beth, what about your experience of, you've mentioned a lot about outdoor facilities, parks and greenway, or the rail trail. What about your experience with like facilities, recreation facilities? Because right now, we know for a long time it was in this old master plan. It's been something that's been talked about for 20 plus years. Tell about an experience or something maybe that you've worked on recently with that.
So right now I am working on, and Brad's going to have a whole different perspective of this, so together it's much better. So I still, even for recreation facilities, I can help plan those, right? So we can understand where your needs are and what type of facility it should be and how big, based on precedents and based on numbers of demographics and square footage and how close another one is to it. I am currently working in Mecklenburg County on the East Bay Regional Rec Center. So we are planning that, and now there's architect who's designing the inside of that, and we're in charge of all of the land planning around that and the permitting for that. We also did the Livingston Center in Asheville, which is also a much smaller rec center, but a rec center nonetheless. And then you have a lot more experience in more of the programming.
I was director in Grandview, Missouri, suburb of Kansas City. They had, right after 9/11, in fact, in 2001, they passed a referendum, 1.5% sales tax increase to build a 60,000 square foot community center that was indoor pool, the fitness center, everything you can think of, plus a big conference center, meeting room wing in the back of it. They finished that in spring of '04. I came on board in November of '04. The director was on it, he retired and nobody announced his retirement, so they wanted to bring someone in who, again, had the kind of management, operational experience to get it up and running and put the structure in place and the staffing in place that made sense. So that's what I did when I went to Grandview.
So together you have a well-rounded sort of perspective of a rec center. For East Bay Regional Rec, which is like 100,000 square feet, which will have a pool, has a nature preserve, it has a teen room. I did all the public input for that. So what does the community need and how does that, what are the program elements that you might include? And then operations and maintenance of that. We are not architects, right? So we're not going to do a building plan for you, but can really help with the planning side of that.
Beth, you mentioned the Little Sugar Creek Greenway, and when I think of that greenway, I think of that being kind of the shining star of greenways. It's one of the most Instagram places in Charlotte. I mean, I've not even been, and I know exactly what it is and what it looks like. Is that part of your recommendation that you come out, or is that something y'all assist with in terms of PR or media marketing for things like that?
So it really depends on what the community needs, but definitely for a planning process, we think that it's really important to do a lot of that, the outreach. So often we work, like right now we're working with the City of Charlotte for the Cross Charlotte Trail. But we're working with their corporate communications. So they have a lot of staff to help them do that. Other communities don't have that amount of staff, so we can help set up a website, we can help set up recommendations, like this is so for the East Bay Regional Rec Center, we wrote a communications plan for their staff to follow. This is when you should put out social media calls, this is the name of it, sort of the brand of what this project is. So we can help do that for sure. Everything costs money, right? Sure. So there's lots of different services that we can do, and what's most fitting really depends on what the needs of the project are and the staff ability or volunteer ability to help pull some of the weight.
These are all great questions. I think it's huge that you have a background in Parks and Recreation because we can draw out things and make plans, but until you've been in the seat to actually present it to your city administrators and council and understand the importance of funding. So my question is that I did like the action plan about how you're putting things in years out there about, this needs to happen between this many years and this needs to happen. Because I think for us, we kind of understand what our priorities would like to be, but working with the actual city staff, administrators, council, and their views of how they want to spend that, you guys would assist us. Obviously, you're talking with them, you're talking with us, you're talking with the community, and kind of together make that where their priorities meet with everybody's goals, I think is my question kind of statement.
In there.
Yeah, that's the right word, reality, because I think for me, just personally as a citizen and being on this board and having a family that are involved, this is really sad. That this has been sitting here and that the goals are not, haven't been met. And so, but I think a lot of it is knowing, the inside of how that really works, understand the reality of where the money's coming from and those priorities.
And what is,
one of the, I'm sorry, Beth.
No, you go.
One of the things that I'm a big believer in, I think I was talking to my wife about this right before I came over here, who also works for Charlotte Mecklenburg Parks and Rec, so we've been in Parks and Rec together for a while, is every department, no matter where you are, has to know what your core is. You have to know what your core mission is. And every department's going to have a separate core mission. But just because you might want to build an ice rink doesn't necessarily mean that should be part of your core mission. You don't know on North Carolina. So that's going to be one of the fundamental things, is to identify what's your core, what is it that you need to do if you don't do anything else, and identify those, and then you start to build from there. But I think that's critically important.
And I would say understanding your population is so important too, and your growth. So, how is Belmont getting ready to change? Might make, a plan a little more easy to implement than maybe in the past 10 years, 13 years. Things are starting to change, I think, and I think people expected it to change quicker than it did.
Couple questions for me, I guess. I heard you mention maintenance. It just come out, especially on a new site. So inside of your plan, are you going to provide, maintenance cost per se for a new facility, or is this for all existing facilities?
We don't have a scope, right? So this is just a qualifications and a conversation.
Okay.
So it really depends on what you need your plan to do.
Okay.
As to what we offer.
Okay.
We can do that.
I heard it come out, so I didn't know if your plan had this or if it was like, okay, a deeper dive in at a later
No, I
date.
think all of that, there's a lot of different things that we can offer you, and that is one of the things that we can offer you if that's important to you, right?
Okay, and along with that, and I've read it in the booklet, I didn't hear it, is programming and programming fee structure that we currently have versus
Your man.
what's out.
I've been working on that in Salisbury. That's important to me. I always like to look at, when I was a director, I always like to look at this as a business. Even though Parks and Rec isn't a business, I always wanted it to be looked at as a business.
I'm a numbers guy, so.
And even if the decision is to not charge for anything, I still think it's important for you to know what things cost.
At 100%.
So, that's what that fees, charges, cost recovery part of the plan should be.
Well, we all gotta be good stewards of the money, so.
And if there are ways to bring in revenue without it impacting the general fund budget, again, I think it's everyone's responsibility to at least identify those.
Right.
If you decide whether or not you want to incorporate them.
And I guess I heard you discuss grants. Do you get involved with the grant writing, or no?
Not really. We have folks that help with grant writing, and Brad might know other people who do.
I've written grants, but that wouldn't be necessarily part of this unless y'all want it to be.
But what we want to do is set you up to be successful for grants. So understanding the grant qualifications that you typically are facing, which the public input is very important for, to help you be competitive. So we want to make sure we're setting you up to be competitive for grants and helping you understand where they are. And if it turns out that you need help writing grants, then we can help guide you with that.
There's one more thing that caught my ear, so, sorry. We mentioned the database, where we're comparing apples to apples in the database. Do you know how old that database is?
The NRPA, the national database, is updated continuously. I mean, it's literally, as a department decides they want to input their information, it goes into it today and it updates. There are over 1,000 departments that have inputted data into the NRPA database. Now that being said, that includes Alaska and California and New York, so it's skewed a little bit. That's the reason I mentioned North Carolina, because the Recreation Resources Service.
And do you know how often that one's updated?
It is done, they do a 5-year rotational cycle. So like this year, they'll focus on fees and charges and try to get that information from all departments. Next year, now I'm just making this up, but next year it will be maintenance costs. The next year after that, it'll be salary study.
Okay.
And then every 4 or 5 years, then it'll.
So it's about 5 years, so we could come in and, I mean, we're not.
I don't think you're going to have any data older than 5 years based on what it is that you wanted to find out from the North.
We're members of both organizations, so I know what he's talking about.
So you know what you're talking about, okay.
Does that sound right? I mean,
yeah, because some databases just aren't kept up, and you start comparing, and you know,
yeah, because
you're comparing against old data, so
it's on salaries right now, everybody. So I'm just letting y'all know.
I'm ready for my raise. Okay.
Yeah.
That's all right.
Time wise, we're.
All right, we don't want to get anyone mad out there. To our colleagues.
Thank you, Beth.
Yeah, and thank you,
Brad. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you, Brad. Appreciate it. Thank you.
It's good to be here.
All right, y'all have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
as
All
well.
right, man. I'll be talking to you. Okay, appreciate it.
Good to meet you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just stay right.
Here's some questions.
Thank you both.
Specifically, because they mentioned cyber relations. So I thought that was part of the master plan, where I didn't see it there.
Interesting.
Open that window back there.
We save money on whatever.
See, I'm just now
Whatever money
comfortable.
we want to spend it to go into a deeper dive into it, to get this. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's what I saw was a little picked up on that.
So I mean, that's one question from this group right here.
Light in here.
Hey guys. Hi. So I could use a USB.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
You got it.
Okay. Thank you, Matt.
Y'all wanna take a 1 minute break?
Yes, that would be awesome. Drink, caffeine.
There's more chicken in there.
That chicken's gotta be nice and cold.
Did you eat my chicken? You gotta take me out to eat it. Everybody have to pull their money.
Now you can probably leave the world. There's no one like us trying to listen.
Oh, yeah.
Terry came out and she's like, it's quite worse. And in the back, go for chili. So your first interview you had it here, then your second interview you got
And everybody behind you.
How's things going for you? Good?
Yes, sorry, didn't realize my mic was
And you're being recorded, so.
Yeah. Yeah, how about you?
Yeah, it's good. It's good. I have a slight memory of this plan. I think the Snow Parks updates, the part of the grant came from this plan, when they put the bathrooms and stuff in,
I'll stay over here.
if I remember correctly.
You're running?
Hey, Katie.
Sounds about the same. I wasn't there, obviously, for that, but that sounds about the time frame.
And you're the
Because I'm trying to think, yeah, I was still here at that point.
Oh, you're the time.
Digital form that arrives in, I think should be in our scope. I've used InDesign.
Yeah.
It's useful for like creating magazine quality print type stuff or big ad displays.
Yeah.
But when it comes time to copy paste anything out of it or edit it, it's a nightmare. It's great for reading things specifically exactly the way you need them. But to run a project off of that information, we would probably want to make sure we request that 2 or 3 different ways, something
Right.
that's more useful.
Right. You know, and this one here, this is kind of one of the things I was talking about, is that, you go ahead. No, I was waiting on you to come sit
Oh, okay,
down.
okay. I didn't want to get in the middle of your conversation.
So like, assessments from last time, see these pinwheel type things? I mean, that's what I was talking about, like reality. We don't have this, I mean, that would be awesome, and it's a huge revenue thing, right? But, we don't, number one, I don't think we have necessarily the space, and if you could take existing spaces and change that, it's like, well, how realistic really was that, I think it's like my biggest thing, don't just hand me stuff that like, oh, this looks great, you know what I'm saying? But, and that's why this thing sat for a while.
No, we're used to it. So he does Bosford.
Well, when they look at the whole city though, there's probably a bunch of gaps in places.
Oh, I don't disagree with that at all.
We've got clusters, but we also have some big gaps too, especially as, it's not, the city is not just all farmland, a big chunk of it anymore, that's shifting rapidly, so.
Y'all gonna be getting all caffeine.
I was trying to. I'll be up all night.
That's why I switched on.
We'll be ready in a second, so she'll be back.
Trip I bumped into. Decent night's sleep last night. Been quite
We
insomnia.
did bring some copies of our presentation, but I didn't bring enough, and I apologize.
We can share.
Yeah, we can share.
But, well, if
friends.
you don't mind, I'll just hand those out afterwards, because I know a lot of folks will thumb through this.
Sure.
No magical answer at the end. Right,
Sorry, I love taking notes on them.
Yeah. But we get this,
That's all, I'll just write on the book. How's that?
but yeah, hard timing is,
That's good, you got 5.
yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I can write on the book.
We'd let you have one, Dan.
What's that?
You can have your own copy.
He writes on the book.
Yeah, I'm good, I'll be scribbling. Sure all the high points are in here. Scooch.
You're fine.
I'm gonna try not to crush that ice.
That's always okay. They have the best ice.
It is sweet.
It is sweet.
Teeth little, they're not supposed to crunch.
And get you jacked up.
Yeah, that's how I feel.
Second wind.
I'm gonna go spider monkey.
Well, we ready. And this is recorded, by the way.
Yeah.
Yep. Should've said that last time.
Yeah, you didn't tell the last people that.
Whoops.
Well, good. Well, thank you all so much. I mean, I know this is getting into a late evening here, so we're gonna, we've got a 15-minute presentation that you've told us to do, and so it's gonna be pretty much of a commercial. So we're gonna hopefully highlight, some things that you're looking at for in a firm that to do your plan. And so I'm just going to briefly go through the agenda and what we're going to talk about tonight. We're just going to briefly go through the team introductions, a little bit about our partnership of how our team is made up. And then Carl's going to drop right into the project understanding. And then he and I are going to talk a little bit about our approach. And then I'm going to wrap it up as far as why we're unique and why we're the team. We'll open it up for some Q&A. So the project team. Myself, I'm Andrew Pack. I've been with Wolpert going on 23 years ago, just the other week. And Carl, I'm not going to say how long he's been here, but it's been a long time. And those 23 years, I've known Carl since then. So Carl and I have done pretty much 95% of the projects that we do have all been park and recreation. I mean, from Freedom Park to sports plexes to rec centers. So we know from the planning end to all the way going to what it costs and how to implement it with the programming, etc. Keys is come back to us. She was with us for a number of years, and we've brought her back. And so we're really glad to have her. She's the one that's going to keep both Carl and I in line. So she's awesome with that. Leon Younger, for those who may not know about Leon, he's with Pros Consulting. And I'm going to go in a little bit about our history with Leon, and of course with the ETC Institute, where they would help us with any type of surveys that we would need with this particular project in scope. Team members, you can see just like any other org chart, we've got Carl as our project manager. We've got the deputy project manager, who's probably just as important as I mentioned, as Katie. And you can see just a list of other folks behind the scenes that we did not bring here tonight that's involved with the project. You can see there to the left of all the different folks, of all the different type of categories that we have within our firm. We've got a lot that we can reach out to. And whether it's a water management issue, something we're working with utilities, with us all being landscape architects and planners, we can reach out to them, even on the architecture. So it's a great, great company to work for, to have all these resources, even in a planning stage, because it always comes down to money. And so how much does this cost? How much will this cost? So we've got a lot of folks that can really help us with that. Wolpert's been around for a long time, just like this town of Belmont has its own legacy. So does Wolpert. We're really proud of that. We go back many, many years back. We are an architecture, engineering, and geospatial firm. There's not too many that have all those three components. In the Charlotte area, we focus mainly on parks and recreation, and we work in multiple states. Again, I have a practice where I oversee our Cincinnati office as well as our Charlotte office. Our Charlotte office is a center of excellence for providing all those different services. And we've been in the Charlotte area for about 40 years. And actually, Renaissance Park And Charlotte is one that brought us to this region. A lot of different comprehensive plans. Carl and I were writing this list up the other day, and there's probably more. Our brain we were trying to go back as far as we could, but this is a pretty good list, and this is just North Carolina. So we bring a vast amount of knowledge, not only to similar cities and towns, such as yours, but also other communities that are progressive in their thinking, maybe more rural areas or things that they're trying to turn around the quality of life of their community. Pros Consulting, they work nationally. They're out of Indianapolis. We also have an office in Indianapolis, and they've done a tremendous amount of work. We've enjoyed working with them. ETC is another full service where, again, that will help us with any type of statistical or surveys, and they've been phenomenal with that. They've got a vast amount of data that we can talk about and really tailor a type of survey for your community. And the team, the three firms, we really go back over 20 years, actually 24 years, when Carl and I were working actually in Indianapolis on the Indy Greenways Master Plan when Leon Younger was the Parks Director there. So that's how far back Wolpert and Pros goes back. And you can see just a number of projects, large projects, small projects that we're working on. And we've got a few projects that we're working with them right now. So project understanding. Carl?
Well, I guess the first thing is that we want to tell you we understand that you're only looking for a 10-year period. And then the next thing is how are we going to go about doing that? And yes, we're going to go through what we would say the typical who we are, what do we have, what do you need, right? How do you do it? Right? Usually 5 steps. But what's important here is we notice that there's certain vibrancy that's going on with the way this community is developing. So it's important that we also look at that for Parks and Recreation, also within your facilities and your program. So how do we do that? We're going to try to get priorities collected. Sometimes those priorities become mandates. We'll talk a little bit about that later. But after that, once we can collect and engage people to tell us what they feel are priorities, there's a difference between wants and needs. We were talking about that with our children. Well, I have an adult brother, he still doesn't know the difference. So anyway, we want to engage the citizens to help us direct those priorities. They can't come from consultants, and they might be able to come from your assistance in finding the right people to tell us. And then the update, as we said, for 10 years, and what we'll look at is how are we going to prioritize those needs? How do they fit with maybe some standards that you might follow for open space, et cetera? Or maybe they want to throw those out the door. We don't know that. But there are cities that don't appreciate standards, I guess is the way to look at it. So we're open to that. But then the next thing is how do we put a plan together that strategically puts you in place to implement the action plan? How do we do it? And I think that's one of the strengths we can bring to it. And then the input is going to come from this meeting, the public, and how we arrange to do, I don't even want to call them public meetings as much as public engagement. And there may be, some data that will come back, either through interviews, through surveys, and social media. We can talk about those aspects, but I don't think we've derived any of them. Little things that we picked up on what we know about you demographically, and I was reading these yesterday and so forth. I think the biggest thing is I did some projections just to say I went beyond 2030, beyond 10 years. But at the growth rate that the state says you're at, you're only going to be around 14,000. 2028, 14 to 15,000 people. So it's not that great of growth. Now, still, if you were at 11.4 today, 11.5, that's still, what, an extra 1,000 people, 2,000 people, I'm sorry. So it's considerable to where you started. But that shouldn't be what's driving, I guess, those use of standards in that. It should be what we hear and what we see and how we prioritize those needs. And then we can start to find how they fit into possible standards for open space, types of parks, types of activities. When we get back to, median age, we're a little slightly older than the state. It's interesting that you're about 20% under 15. So think about it, 10 years from now, those are people who are going to think, is this a good place for me to come back to? Maybe recreation can form that to coming back home. And then 15 to 34, that's the people who start to get the money to get their kids involved in recreation. New statistics that I had looked at about median household income, slightly, again, you're above what North Carolina is doing. Some values about homes. Again, as you probably know, living here, I'm not sure how valid that be in the last year because things are changing. I know that this community is becoming vibrant from people in Charlotte where I live saying, have you ever been to Belmont? You ever went to, I'll say the Greenway Premium Pub or one of the restaurants down here? I heard there's great bakeries, and so there you go. The rest that I think is important is there are people within the metropolitan area that are looking at Belmont a lot differently than they used to. And a lot of it has to do with that 21-minute commute that is a statistical thing that was asked of the people in the survey. So now we're going to talk a little bit about what drives the plan and what goes on. Well, some people think that these things, the things that you own, drive what you do. But in reality, it's the other way around. It's your programming, your ideas about what I want to do at that facility is how it works. So programs drive facilities. And we've grouped into these things, seniors, adults, youth programs. But that what we're going to look at in this plan is what do we do today? What do we see the trends going for in the future? And how they apply to maybe what you have or maybe what you need. Do I need more acreage? Do I need something attached to this building? We'll find out.
Want to go through, wrapping up here really quickly on our project approach. I mean, in our project approach, we'll tailor that to every community. Every community is different. We're not coming in here with a Walmart or McDonald's and saying this fits. We know what it's going to look like. We know it's going to fit like. No, it's not. It's going to have to be tailored. Our approach you've listed in your RFQ as far as the phases from what Carl was just going through on the needs, on what your existing facilities are, and what's the recommendations in your final plan. Where are you going into the future? And all that's going to take strong project management, which we've identified the team on there. Again, the integrated process where it's comprehensive, but we're looking at all those things from the programs, services, how you organize the management, from the park facilities, and really looking at the specific needs as far as with the river, and with you guys having a great asset. I mean, Charlotte turned its back on the river many years ago, and you guys did not. So I think that's really awesome to do. And some of the things that we do as far as our goal setting and any plan is, we call it kind of a three-legged structure or approach. But we're looking at environmentally. What are we doing? What are we being as good stewards? Yes, even in the park and recreation plan. How are we being good stewards with the finances of our community? I mean, also we're really looking hard on our social and cultural. Being diverse as we are in America, we've got to continue with that in our parks and recreation plans. We benchmark, all the things that Carl was talking about. Engagement is key. Again, we would define what that engagement is. There's a lot of communities we go into, very limited amount of public input. We're not saying that's bad, but it's what the committee and what you guys are looking for as far as your consultants. Carl's talked a little bit about the demands, and of course the prioritizing the action plan and getting implemented with your project. So Carl's going to kind of walk us through just a little bit. We're calling the 6 pillars of our approach. And they all tied together.
Yeah, and you can see I kind of led you here already a little bit about community priorities. You know, are they really mandates? Mandates can be perceived in a couple different means. One could be a code that you have to follow. The other could be the will that has already been brought to a government organization and said you must. That's another way. And then the other could be, you know, what is it that the community has strived or come to you for? Level of service, well, once again, you look and see where you are, where you want to be, find out where your core services are, and then with that, who plays a role? You know, there are private institutions that play a role, there are public institutions that play a role in recreation. Later, they hopefully become partnerships, and that's important because you probably know your partners better than we do. And then the next thing is financially, those partners come into play because they could be friends of, I'll just say friends of the parks, or a foundation that is here to help support recreation, another form of partnership. Highlighted a little bit about standards. Those deal with acreage, number of courts, etc. And then the other is we're going to evaluate your existing system and see whether it fits for the future. And if not, how do we adapt to that?
But I'm going to say, just to wrap up, why this team? Again, we specialize in park and recreation plans from the beginning to the end. I mean, Carl and I have been doing this for many years. We love doing this. We love coming in different communities and giving our expertise and really working with this community and stepping back and seeing where things go. And it's been a lot of fun. We're a local team. Again, been here for many, many years. You know, we are a community-based process. Again, we talk about communities that don't have that. We already know that you guys are looking at trying to engage that, as we're saying, capturing your personality. And Belmont has its personality. You're continuing trying to bring that out, and it's going to continue to grow. So we got to help be part of that vision, because it's going to continue to grow. It's not always going to be the way it was last year. We got an ideal combination of looking at your asset base, your parks, your facilities, and also looking at your operations. I mean, operations is such a huge key component. We've got a client now that's talking about, and we do analysis on turf versus synthetic. They think you put synthetic down and you don't have to maintain it. You still have to maintain it. You know, so there's a lot of perceptions out there. Look at the outcomes. Really, the data-driven outcomes is really key for us. And we'll develop those as we're going through the plan, because if you don't have these outcomes, then you're never going to reach those. Now, we may not be able to reach all the outcomes for whatever reason, but it really keeps us focused on that plan. Useful plan, I know that we're looking at some grants, things like that that's used for this plan, but we want it to be a living document. I mean, you want to be able to, where we can share all that information, so next year, if there's a business plan component, you're able to update that. You know, you're able to get smart on that with the staff and use that as your tool going forward. We're here to help you define your vision so you can achieve it. And again, the team has done numerous master plans, like from comprehensive plans, but from park plans into implementation. And we've done a lot of work and a lot of costs. Even just on the Part F funds, we've done over $20 to $25 million in matching funds for our clients, and that's a lot. So again, we appreciate the opportunity, and we're glad to be here, and we're excited for you guys on this plan, and we get excited about it, and appreciate your all's work and volunteering to do this for your community. That really means a lot. So with that, we'll just open it up for any questions that you guys have on the team, and we'll try to answer them.
My first one you mentioned the living document aspect of the master plan. So I'm curious as to what form that would take in a couple ways. One, literally, what type of file are we going to get? What type of printout? Are we going to get something that we can work with, that we can hand off to Zip, and he can put into his systems and hit the ground running, or that we can expand it out to the rest of our group here, do you guide, is even guiding us through some of that maybe part of this living aspect of updating the plan and managing the project?
Let's just say, get like the financial piece of it. If the city has like a 2-year plan, CIP plan, then we're gonna put all this information in that 2 years, and we're gonna match what the city's looking for, so the upper management, the administration, can match anything that you're looking at, even goals, even mission statements, anything that matches a template or what the either manager or the mayor that's pushing forward with that. So we'll be able to match that. Now, secondly, from there, we'll work with any type of format, whether it's Word, PM. Today, it's kind of endless of how we can transfer any of that information, but it's also just looking at what you guys need to make that be a living document, even on the site plans.
Yeah,
work with the GIS department and trying to keep those things. We're working with the layers that you guys got, so it's not a foreign map that, oh my gosh, what did Wilbur provide us? No, all those things we'll be able to work up front.
What do I do with this map?
Right.
Because it's not ArcGIS, for instance. We can work through those. As long as you know up front, it's a lot easier. Like a Word document is probably the easiest thing for most of us to work through today. But it doesn't make for a pretty document.
Right.
So that's the other end of the spectrum. But yeah, we often turn our text and so forth, it's your document. It's for you to take. You remarked about writing in the margins. I have a park director who's been doing that for about 25 years. And each update that he has ever had, we'll take that and he will be writing in those margins for the first 5 years. That's Burlington. He's like, who is that?
What areas have you, I know I talked to Charlie, what are you doing for Charlie, City of Shelby?
Well, we've helped with them with, again, some big planning with their city park as well, looking at some visioning, planning, and then we're wrapping up right now. Actually, Carl just came from there, Hannah's Sportsplex. It's a 6 fields.
6 fields,
about
6 soccer fields. It's predominantly a soccer field complex.
And it's just wrapping up right now. So that has all the architecture and a lot of planning that we did for them. We've been working with that community for a number of years. And that community is different because even with that plan and working with the manager, there's a lot about these fields as far as the needs, but there's also the economic benefit that you can get from it. And that's a whole other separate piece. We've done numerous sports complexes as well, from Matthews Sportsplex to Manchester Meadows down to Rock Hill. We're working down in New York right now on board. So we do a lot of business plans and a lot of forecasting on the economic development for communities, but some communities don't really care. They want to provide for their community. And so we always like going in, and that's a discussion that we would have. We want to provide the community first. We did that with Mecklenburg County, and we made sure that it was a community park first, and then secondly was a tournament facility. It was real important for that community. We made sure to get that message out.
And is that particular information, is that coming from your city administrators and council and staff, or is that something that you take in from the community as well, or?
Well, there's a balancing act, right? I mean, because you got a business, the manager's running a business of this town, so you've got to run that, and then you may have people that just moved in and they want like an ice skating rink. Well, it's not like we're going to say let's go get crazy with an ice skating rink, but we have to really analyze that and make sure is there a true need? Is this something that we could really bring forward for the community, and can the community rally around it? And it's kind of a really tough balancing act, but we really do listen to all the constituents. We sit down with focus group meetings where we meet with administration, we'll meet with council folks, and everyone has their own. We meet with the athletics and a lot of public meetings like we understand you want baseball field, but what else do you want in the park? We always come in and try to make sure our parks have parks within parks. It's not a soccer park. I mean, there's a playground. Katie's has young kids. My young 4 girls are all grown up now, but when they were small, I mean, we're really a diverse from young to old.
When you're doing the surveys and looking at this, do you ever run into a situation where you start to ask the people that you're surveying, or maybe people in focus groups, what their perceptions are on how much the thing should cost up front versus operating costs? When UNCC came through and did some work for us last winter, one of the interesting trends that kind of stood out in the numbers was that there were some facilities that costed more up front, but it was a lot less expensive to operate them. And it sort of looked like maybe they had invested in a facility that might be a little less expensive. Maybe it was the heating and cooling of it or something, one of those big expense drivers. Maybe it was something else. I don't know. But I'm wondering, it's not just do they have the stomach do they want, or is there a mandate for the facility, but how are they willing to pay for it or fund it on an ongoing basis after it first gets built too? And
go ahead.
I think you just answered your question.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is
I may have missed it.
how you answer the question, or ask the question rather, because often we will ask, so, okay, you got your shopping list.
Right.
We all go to the store with a shopping list, and sometimes not enough money, right? So now we have to prioritize what we really need again, right? Or how to budget it, right? And the return on it. So the way that we ask those questions are, okay, here's your list. How do you think it should be funded? And then there's a list there. And then in that pecking order, if it was to be funded, would you agree to possibly this method, or this method? And then so on and so forth. So I'm not 100% excellent at doing the questions. But the object is for you to create a consensus on maybe decision makers being able to say, well, it looks like people are willing to pay, if you will. How much? That's the tough question.
Right.
When does it begin to hurt? That's when we have to rely on the practicality of a board and people who know their community one-on-one. We can give you the figures. We can do the analysis, but we can't put the hot button on, is this true or not, that they're willing to pay. We can only ask the questions and decipher. Well,
And every community is different.
Yeah.
There's communities where they're scared to get like a bond and put the real money on it, and they always come up short. I mean, it's easier to send Monday morning quarterback to look at that, but when we get involved with the next phase, then all those wants and needs are still there, and like right now, prices have shot straight up. I mean, in the recession, there's no way that Mecklenburg County could have built that sportsplex for the amount of money they spent. That was a $35–40 million project, and they got all that for about $25 million. So it's all, and we're working now down at York. And they budgeted money in 2012, so you got a council that said, well, why has the price gone up? Well, if you just look at 3.5% for the last 6–7 years, that's almost close to $1 million right there. So without even doing anything.
Right.
So but we've got a great team. I think pros, ETC, as I mentioned before, how you ask those questions. We interview all those groups before that survey goes out. So you can have the right questions. And if there's some holes there, we'll follow back up. A lot of times we'll follow that back up maybe with at the social media, or maybe even at our next public meetings, have charrettes or workshops like that.
So we've done both sides of the gathering information through quote surveys. One to be can't even say it right now, being out in the sun already. Statistically stable and correct. And then the other is, the Survey Monkey, and using our history and a little bit of input from professionals we've worked with, and that's their business. Say, these are the questions we're thinking of putting out here. How should we look at them and use you maybe a little judiciously with input. You know, where we're not paying for a full-out survey. And we did that in Salisbury. But the information came back, and we could filter it and put it back out on social media for people to see.
Right.
We tried, in that case, this may be me because I'm old, and I think that you can mess with social media too easily if you really wanted to. Yes, if you had some will to do it, some will to push what you want, that I think you could get around it. And that's where the survey people are good about, that's why they still like phone.
Right.
They still like that.
But we still used all those methods together. We don't rely just upon the survey. I mean, we got the survey, we got the standards that we're looking at, and then we're also looking at the focus group or public needs. So we'll take all those, and we'll kind of put them in a funnel, and we'll start, dissecting it out.
I'll do the story. ETC went through their survey in East St. Louis, I think it was. I think pros at the time we were working with them, we wrote out our book from all our group meetings and so forth and said, here's where we're finding commonality. And I think Leon did his list, and he did it from only a few days he was there. He goes, this is where it's going to come out. And then ETC came and said, here's what the statistics were. And it's scary to see in the middle how much in common they were, not so much errant things. So it's important to have those methods, and actually have that brain power to go with it.
Right.
Anybody got more questions?
No.
Well, are there specific on-the-ground projects that you're proud of that you could tell us about aspects of?
We're proud of every.
We got
Master planning.
Well, personally, I mean, that's a good question because I've had that asked before. I would say, probably for me professionally, probably is locally, is Manchester Meadows, the city of Rock Hill. Because they started out where they had a plan and they weren't really sure about it. And I'm serious, I took just bum out of the trash. I just threw out a couple ideas, went into a workshop with the council, and then they looked at them, and the next thing I know, they said, let's go ahead and do it. And I got put on the spot as far as how much it's going to cost. And at the time, it was like $12 million.
the fields. I know when
Yeah.
we started out, remember, it was a $4 million budget.
But from there, just working with the, we came up with a solution on that project to meet every month with the manager and every department head. Even from Public Works, trash, you name it. They were sitting around in the room, and I was presenting every month an update on that project. And it was really turned out to be a really collaborative plan where you would think someone didn't have a really good input. It's like, why is this person sitting here? They would come out with some fantastic ideas. So I'm really proud of that project, for one, because it was a difficult project. It was built over sewage lagoon, and there's a lot of environmental. Well, no, it's fine. We had to get a lot of permits, wetlands. It was a very difficult project to be to try to get on the schedule, and we were able to get our drawings out and get a good contractor. But that one is a lot of aspects. It's a fantastic project outside of take the fields away, just the architecture, the design, the trails, greenways, playground, all those things, and it's holding up. I guess that's the other thing. If you go, it's holding up to what we've designed. So.
Let me ask you this: that consists of ball fields.
It was It was 2 synthetic fields and 8 ball fields. Had the U.S. Youth Soccer Championship there.
Yeah, that's part I was going to ask about the economic benefit of that.
Yeah.
Facility.
Yeah, they've got a lot of good stories about economics.
Because we're looking at potentially, hopefully, a rec center somewhere down the future. That's what we're looking for. We're trying to find out the economic impact a rec center would have for our area.
Well, we can help you with that too, because there's a lot of different type of rec centers that are going out there from the program. Again, you can look at it from just trying to be unique, but also be multi-purpose, because that's what we're seeing in the last 5 years, is you can't, and I'm not bringing up something bad, but like skate parks. I mean, with skate parks, tennis, I mean, they've been flopping back and forth. Tennis becomes a skate park. Take out the skate, put back in the tennis. I mean, so it's really trying to make sure that you design, design a building that's multi-purpose, that it has that flexibility to either expand or be able to have multi-function in it. That's critical.
And that's where we do rely a little bit with our teammates with that because of their experience of looking at trends.
Right.
I don't know if you were at North Carolina Park and Recs a couple of years ago. Leon and I both did a segment on where we think our industry is going. What are the trends that we've seen, which ones are there, and whether they're just a fade, if you will. We didn't say it that way, but and for the most part, I think it was pretty well received. You have to be there.
So you've had experience in the rec centers?
Yes.
And how about her? She hasn't said anything since I've been here.
In Rock Hill, I was on that one.
Yes.
What did you do in Rock Hill?
Boyd Hill.
Boyd Hill.
Yeah, that was a little renovation for an old swimming pool. We made it a zero entry pool. It was basically a gymnasium that's been used for years in this neighborhood for after-school programs and then summer programs, summer camps. And it happens to have an instruction pool that we gave it zero entry. And that's how we tried to get it. We tried to get a little money because we could do some therapy.
Andrew, on your last slide, you had, I believe you had a date of January 30th on there. If you were selected, is that still, is that
tight.
doable?
I mean, there's some holidays in there.
And we'll be changing that date. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, I saw the date on that last
We
slide.
counted 4 months and we said, that's not January.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm thinking that's kind of, yeah. So what's your average timeline?
Well, I mean, they average what, I mean, it all depends, let's start with the end in mind, right? I mean, so if we're going for a Part F grant,
Yep.
and so that, you're looking at April, so you got back up, and then, if council has to approve it.
Yes.
And if we gotta go through a lot of reviews and things like that, then you're pushing right into January during the Christmas break, and then you go back, and then we got Thanksgiving, and we've done many plans through those times. It can be done, it just, are we gonna be happy with the end product?
Yeah, I want quality. I'm not.
Yeah,
I'm more concerned with that.
What I
I
would
want
say
to-
is, and I don't know where your budget retreats and that start.
Right.
Do they start around February?
Yeah, we're not looking to do a part of grant or anything like that, so we're not holding anybody to
Okay.
Right,
that
so-
January 30th
Okay.
date, so.
Yeah, so your timeline would be.
So you're for this, 5 to 6 months.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
That's
if
what
they
I'm-
go,
Yeah, okay.
a lot of
That's-
times, the committee we may say, hey, let's pause for whatever reason. I mean, you would find a good spot to just pause, we get, council, the mayor has decided, I mean, whatever, I mean, there's a lot of different reasons, but we'll find a good place to pause where you don't lose a lot of momentum. But if we're working with you guys, it's that momentum that does get lost, and come back and you tell them what you told them, and then tell them again what you just told them.
Tell them again, yeah.
It's the
Yeah,
old,
yeah.
like we do at council.
Yeah, we start our budgetary process probably in March, so we're trying to have something finished at least sometime in March, April, and have this ready before the July 1 of
Yeah,
2019.
yeah, that's not a problem.
Yeah,
That's not-
that's what we're trying to do.
That's kind of why we asked about budget timing and that, and when you maybe do retreats and start thinking, because it's great to give them that information on.
Maybe as a
They can
draft.
come back with.
Even as a draft,
As
because
a draft.
then
That's what
you may
I'm-
grab their attention at
Mhm.
that point.
Okay.
Because particularly when you start throwing numbers at stuff, I mean, money always makes them look at stuff.
Yeah. It's gonna make them look.
It's a place like a rec center, I mean, when you have a big capital improvement project like that, that it's gonna have staffing, a lot of operation costs with it.
But you'll be able to identify all our needs, right? For rec center, splash pad, dog park, whatever. Okay. Because all those things are on the table.
They're all,
Oh, yeah.
we've heard them all.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I saw like Greenville, that was the ice skating. Somebody
Yeah.
came down from
Yeah.
Buffalo, nothing against Buffalo, but they were like the worst, the hockey ice skating rink. I'm like, I was like, you're in the Carolinas?
They are in the foothill.
Yeah. And that,
It wasn't Greenville, North Carolina, was it?
That is South
For South Carolina.
South
That's right.
yeah, the population says
We did both plans.
14,020, whatever, we're, if you go down that end, we're gonna bust out the seams at the end. So it's
Well,
gonna be way
those
over
are
14,000
only,
people.
those are only trends that we can look at
Yeah.
as far as what the planning tells you. It's not,
Yeah.
has nothing to do with reality.
Well, she's planning right there, and she can tell you that we're gonna probably bust that wide open.
It's just projections.
14,000.
It is
but-
steady.
Yeah.
It's letting people realize.
Well, you know,
Yeah, now I'm looking at what you,
My
I'm
answer would be
looking
is, you know, it depends on whether there's still going to be, nasty word in North Carolina, annexation or anything, any people wanting to be in Belmont, meaning your surrounding Gastonia, Gaston County, right? Because that's about how it has to work.
Thank you.
I think y'all will get home.
Well, I just
Thank
want to
you.
thank Katie for giving you guys that information to share. She sat back so quietly, I know she.
I know,
You know, they said she had to be here. Because we said 15 minutes, we're only gonna split it into two.
It gets hard, it gets
You have
hard.
to be here because they need to understand that she'll probably be the primary contact after this to tell us what to do. Saying you're not on schedule, or this is what I heard. And we need
That's
that
like,
person.
just if you didn't- there's a PowerPoint and a
Okay.
PDF.
Take a look at it.
If you want to sit up.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
I got this, I can do that. And just let me know who don't have it, and I'll try to get a copy.
Dan doesn't get it.
Sorry, I'm good.
I was just out there for the National Park
Well, I can give you mine.
and I'll be back out here.
And I can make a, if anybody needs, I got a presentation.
A little blank bedtime read.
No, got enough.
I actually read this stuff.
I did too.
Paul Barry read culture, the references in here.
Wait a minute, Terry.
Good for you.
Well, I don't have English, so that's why I'm.
Now, thank you for coming out.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate it.
No, but it was interesting.
We got to, we can't
What I
keep
found
kicking
out.
the can, man.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure it was. Thank you,
All
guys.
right, thank you.
Were you wanting us to vote on this tonight? I mean, I thought that's what you
Share some quick
originally
ideas
said.
and
I mean,
vote a different time.
whatever y'all wanna do, whatever y'all choose, we can, y'all can do it tonight, we can wait and come back.
Well, let's talk about it. Let's debrief.
Yeah, I think we do need to debrief minimum, and
While it's fresh.
And we'll see where we are.
Comparison.
do we want the doors open, or?
We're not on
Probably
tape right now, right?
Yeah.
Well, I don't think this part should be.
No, it's-
Because as we're talking about, other people,
Well, in private, in contract.
But this is private.
I don't know if you can do that like that.
Well, whose idea was it to even video this or re-record this? I mean, we are only an advisory board.
It still gotta be recorded.
We're not parks, it says who?
Is it being broadcast right now?
It's been broadcast also.
Oh, come on.
All means are broadcast.
I mean, the contract and negotiations, when you're talking about other people that have presented it, I mean,
Shut that
this,
door,
we are not a regulatory board. This is not Parks and Rec, and this is not to the city council. What advisory board gets, a bit, taped, really?
All of them do. All
Whose
of them
idea?
in the city does. The Main Street, everybody that sits in here is recorded. Sorry about that. That's just how it is.
Do you want to move forward with discussing the three groups?
Motion, or second?
I'll second it.
Okay.
All right. All right, so the floor's open.
Let me get my
I'll
notes.
let you- Yeah. think some of the bigger topics obviously was, I think we were all interested in the surveying and how that data information comes in. Any specifics on surveying, any differences that you guys saw within the groups?
I wasn't a huge fan of the robocall. I think that was land design.
Yes.
Yeah, I think of the
I
first
just-
and of the third use the ECT.
Yeah,
the same.
I feel like if there's
So they
one
both have the
place
same
to
thought.
cut corners, it's probably not the survey.
Yeah, I agree.
Just
I
from
agree
like
with you.
politically, probably gonna need to push city council to fund some of this. And it's a lot easier to do that if we've got a high quality survey that we can say, this is what the people want.
The facts and figures.
The
Yeah.
survey is one of the areas where that's potentially a couple-month process and one of the more expensive components if we're looking to bring our costs down, and I won't mention the amount since we're being recorded, but that's the area where we have the room to save a little money if we want to do some portions of that ourselves. If we were to mail everything, for example, that's $6,000 to mail everybody in Belmont one time, and that's with an open rate that's maybe in the, single-digit percentage range, so
Right.
that would drive expenses up, but if we mix it with other things, then we can bring expenses down. Whether or not we have them do that or not, I don't know, but I don't know that, personally, I feel like the types of questions that we need to have asked, I don't think we have the competence to do that, based on, the fact that we're trying to get funding through grants and things like that and meet requirements with the master plan. I don't necessarily think that our survey from UNCC, I don't think those questions will meet those goals either, which I didn't realize that until this week. That was one of the things I learned this evening, but I don't think we're going to be able to take that survey and reuse that, so whatever.
Yeah, I think what he had said was that it would be the 10 times the 300, so we're talking about the 3,000.
It's got to get to, we have to
3,000.
reach, we have to get 300 to 400
300
back.
to 400 back.
Right.
So
that'd
that's
be
a
10
starting point of
10%.
3,000.
Right,
That's
exactly.
$1,500 to $1,600 in mailing expenses.
Right.
That's not counting paying them to mail it, that's just the postage.
Sure.
That's not hours of stuff, send it.
Analyze it.
Tabulate it when it comes back.
Yeah.
Count the missing chads, all that good stuff. But,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
oh, no, go ahead, I'm done.
The Wolpert and the bench, they use the ETC, whereas with land design, they were talking about, I heard her say, are you doing your own survey?
Yeah, I think she was under the impression.
That we're doing our own survey.
Yeah.
And I don't think we should do our own survey.
No, I agree.
I'm with you.
I agree with
Well, and
Yeah.
just in terms of grants, like you said, I mean, that's not an unbiased survey then. We have to, I think the survey, to be a legitimate survey, it has to be done third party. It cannot be conducted through us. I think we contribute, but I don't think in terms of legitimacy that it can be conducted
It
through
has
us.
to be statistically
I
relevant.
don't know, I mean, that's
So-
the route that the city of Gastonia's taking. They're doing their own work, they're doing their own surveys, and they're also doing their own inventory. And like I said, their costs come up at $35,000.
Right.
So,
Well, when I look at doing your own survey, I'm thinking staff time, there's some manual labor
Right.
that's gonna be in, and I really don't know that the Parks and Recreation, planning, whoever
Planning,
is gonna
yeah.
have that kind of time.
Somebody's gonna have to put the data
Yes.
together in a presentable fashion.
It might be $35,000 to a third party, but there's other expenses that might hit something else. And I'm not against that, if we're having your staff do it or something like, or if we're, I'm not against giving the hours to City of Belmont people versus a third party, but do we have the expertise for it? Maybe Gaston County or Gastonia does, maybe they don't, I don't know. I would point out, especially on the land design comment, I got the impression when we read through their initial proposals and the scope that we'd given, that I thought they were, I liked them because they seemed to provide some unique perspectives that I didn't see from the other ones.
Right.
But I also kind of felt like they weren't completely listening, or they didn't capture some things. And I thought that in my review of Wolpert, they were the only ones that hit every single thing in the scope within their original submission to us. Now, since we're looking for a firm that is going to deliver a document that we have to work off of, that kind of seems like a good trial run. I like Benish because they've got a lot of touches to our community, and so I'm personally, I'm just weighing the question, do we want somebody that really knows the community, been working here for a long time? Do we need a fresh look?
I
if-
totally
But the
agree.
interesting-
Go ahead, Claudine, go ahead.
You know, the interesting thing about the Wolpert was, they were the only ones that actually put the Belmont data up there.
Yeah, the demographic stuff.
Or
I
even
was
the-
really impressed
the
about that.
programs, the parks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they spent
The
time
research.
and, really knowing what the Belmont has offers, the stuff like that. I mean, I was pretty impressed with that because, they were the only people that actually did that.
It just seemed like they put a lot more time into developing their presentation than
exactly.
the other two.
And the other thing, sorry, no, go ahead, go.
The only other thing that I would comment on, I'm personally in favor of utilizing ETC and their expertise. I feel like it's completely huge to have an expert, and then just looking at the profiles from Wolpert. Yes, that Jason's profile and his experience and working with, the research and specific to local governments and some of the studies and his expertise there was very impressive to me. I think that that's the kind of thing that we'll need to be successful in getting some of the whopping grant amounts that we're going to be asking for in the
I would
coming years.
agree. If you took the time to go through that ETC from, was it Waxhaw? The results. I know when it got to me, I was just really looking at it really hard because I'm a data cruncher really. So I'm looking at it and it was, I liked what I saw as far as that goes. So the two companies that use it, obviously they're going to get a stronger, so now I'm teetering between the two and which one's going to provide what I want. Now, for land design, I do like the fact that they got a Parks and Rec previous Parks and Rec director there that can help us. So, I mean, I think that's the one strong thing that they had. But, I mean, I guess my question would be, do we need that?
I think they,
Well, we
and
have a
I
Parks
agree,
and
they
Rec.
have they gotta have a skill set.
That's what I'm saying, we have one, do we have somebody else to tell us where our shortfalls are?
Right.
I mean,
Or our strengths?
And I'm not gonna vote in this, I'm gonna leave this up to you guys, but to me, land design, that was their strength, was him.
Well, because they have a skill set, I think that, I don't know if it is necessarily applicable to Belmont. I think it is very applicable to Charlotte and the demographics they have in Charlotte, like I said, the little creek, or the little sugar. I mean, that is so Instagrammed. Everybody I know that's my age goes to that and does that. But is that what we need in Belmont? I don't know if it is, but I think they're offering a set of skills that I don't know if that's necessarily useful for us.
It seemed like they'd be really good to engage if we were looking to build like a particular park. It seemed to be like kind of their thing.
But one particular project.
Driven.
Yeah, because you got like
I would
Premier
agree.
Bearden, Little Sugar Creek, they're all like really nice
Like the
parks.
railway, greenway thing that
Yeah.
they
It's
all.
not
I would
a
agree.
project as a
Yeah.
whole.
So what's
Yeah.
Go ahead. So I say that we know, it sounds like from everything that land design probably is off the table. So we're looking at the other two. If I can just make a statement with Benish, my concern is that if in fact, and this is probably not a present issue, but I guess since they were the past site solutions, and I look at what that plan, what did we really get from that? It concerns me that there was not more action off of that. And I'm not saying John was obviously not there, but, what I look at is that past projects and our experience with them. If it wasn't an action plan built into that, it concerns me that wasn't moved forward on. So, I agree with everything else as far
Well, I
as
made a
surveying
couple of the
things.
phone calls, so I went ahead and called the references on some of these people, and called, and I'm not really saying names right now, but the Wolbert people worked with here in the city, and they came at the top recommended. The problem with the Benish, because they also worked with them, and they really, really liked them also, but the problem was what, you said, that they really did not have an action plan. So
Right.
that's kind of funny, what you just said that, because somebody else said the same exact thing. So-
With an action plan, I mean, we're
And we
gonna
also have
provide
an
some.
architect too.
Right. With an action plan in place, a true action plan, we've got some accountability.
Yep.
And we have responsible people to make these things happen.
I think one of the things that I learned tonight too is we have to be careful how we build our scope to whomever we do hire. In terms of, we can have a plan that we'll use as our basis to go get grant money. And we can try to follow it. And maybe it will work or maybe it won't like it did last time. But I think there's other things that we could gain from this that could be handed off to us as a commission and to Zip and his team to run with some of these things, take those action items and do something useful. In the land design, not to pick on them, but they mentioned a program that's not easy to even copy paste stuff out of it.
Right.
Nobody uses it. I mean, I can't use it.
It's great.
I don't know how to use it.
Yeah, I've got a client who used to run a magazine. They used it to print magazines. And it will make a beautiful document.
Right.
But it won't
user-friendly.
necessarily be something that we can drop into Excel or into a project management system
right.
or into whatever it is that we need to drop it into. And so I think with our scope, the requirements, when we do hire somebody, we've got to maybe do some internal quick looking and see what does Zip need to run with what we get, what do we need if we're engaged in it, where do we want it to live, do we want it on Word, do we want it in something else? Yeah, it could be anything. I'm open to, I work with all sorts of different stuff myself, so it doesn't matter to me, I'm agnostic that way, but we have to ask for it, because if we don't, we'll get some PDF document like we got from UNCC, and we won't be able to copy paste the questions out of it for the survey if we wanted to extend the survey, or if we want to expand on a question on our own, in a year or two from now when we're trying to dig into some new thing, or so. I just want to mention whoever we go with.
That's a good point.
Along those lines, you mentioned like the inventory and things that maybe,
Right.
that are like, that
They've
are
already been
easier to
marked.
do with volunteers, and the experts can spend more time on the other things that we don't have.
Right, and that might shave some months off of, whether it's a 4 or 5 or 7 month thing too, if we can squeeze the inventory down, or if
But
we
we
can
have an
squeeze the survey
inventory in
time.
Gaston County, just did their comprehensive master plan, which includes the inventory of all the stuff in Gaston County, so we already have that.
Right.
I think it's safe to make a motion that we are going to recommend Wolpert,
I'll second.
as the company choice to do the comprehensive master plan.
I'll second.
Everybody in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
All right.
Unanimous?
Yeah.
That was easy. Nice. That's an easy grade.
Almost 3 hours. She's got a good outlook. I appreciate that. Guys, I know it's getting late. I do want to take just a quick few minutes and
the
talk about,
gadabouts.
the gadabouts. And I don't mean to, of course, keep us burning till the late night, but I do think it's something we need to address. Just from, I sent you guys an email kind of on a quick update on a couple of calls from Mr. Winslow, talked to Richard Turner as well. And what I'm going to recommend, I had gotten some information from Richard Turner that, the council obviously has been discussing a lot of this. They've been getting phone calls themselves about concerns and things like that. What I would suggest, we can talk a little bit, get your thoughts on that. But I think at this point, our recommendation should just be sent to the council. I think it's something we can't make a defiant, answer for them. But I do think we can say, this is our recommendation, and go back to the council and let them make their decision based on what they need to make that off of. So that's my recommendation, just in collecting the information over the last couple of weeks. So, okay.
Yeah. That's all we can do. I mean, that's it.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Perfect.
Yeah.
City council created this problem, they need to fix it.
Yes. I agree. My personal recommendation is just listening to back and forth things. I know that their change will be coming at some point, and, restructuring those things, and we may end up finding out a lot from this comprehensive master plan. My recommendation would be to leave the gadabouts as it is until we have a more definition, I guess, of what the council then, when we send this to them and they say, this is what we recommend, till we understand more of what they're looking for. And then if we collect information from the master plan to see what our senior citizens want. And I would appreciate any other comments on that.
No, I agree with you.
There'd probably be good questions to work into the survey. you know, when
Absolutely.
we do it.
Or bring them to the focus groups.
Yeah.
With the bus.
Yeah, no, definitely.
And
I guess, I'm in agreement, but I guess my question is, are they a part of Parks and Rec?
Yes. They're on the website, yes.
Then why were they
Spoke with
told?
Ron Folk.
So why were they told they weren't?
That was a misunderstanding, and I think it was it was kind of like a misspeak. But they are Parks and Rec, and they have been for the past 31 years.
Right.
They come under the
Bye,
Parks
Melissa.
and
And so-
website.
So the other part of it is, there was a lot of dialogue about the drivers. And it's my understanding, and I didn't speak a lot when they were talking, because a wise man once told me, first seek to understand. So I've spoke with some of you, I've spoke with council, I've spoke with people in the community. And it's my understanding that when Brian was hired on, that part of his employment was to get a CDL license.
Exactly.
And that was for him to drive the bus and provide, as a driver for this. So we took that on, then we got Eric as a part-time driver. So, and then it's also my understanding, going back, that Eric, the conflict was only for October and not for November. So that's another thing I've been told. So I think there's a lot of misunderstanding going around, and unfortunately, we've upset a group, right, that are ambassadors for our town.
Exactly.
What better advertisement can you have from a group of people out and about? And that's great PR. So I'm in agreement. I'm like, it shouldn't stop. We should recommend that the program continues on as is until we have better understanding of exactly what we need to do for our senior programming. And part of the master plan should bring that out. So.
Thank you. Nice, thank you.
And the only other comment I'll make is just, I've experienced the same thing, just in conversations. There's a lot of confusion, and people just don't understand the why, the what, the who, and, the who especially is, it's like a hot potato, and that, we can't, as a board, we can't sort that out. And really, it all kind of goes back to council, so it's for them to sort out. And, which I love getting that back around, for them. So but I agree too. I feel like we've made, it's, the more you stir it, the more it stinks. Mm-hmm. And I don't think we have a good reason why we're stirring it yet. And so I'm also in favor of that until we know more, and until there's something else where we can go, okay, maybe it's 2019 or whatever, but here's the new program, and this is what that looks like, instead of, I'm just taking this, but you can't have anything else until later. So that's my personal opinion on it as well. So, but I just think there's just a lot of confusion, and this would just kind of help
Well, let me say one
ease
thing.
some of that.
First of all, the question about Brian. Yeah, Brian does have these CDLs, but now Brian is taking on a new role as being athletic supervisor. So it's a lot of responsibilities to that. So taking him off his job for 8 hours to go on the trip and leaving those kids. Brian has about 450 kids he's responsible for, and that comes along with the parents. So that role has changed from 2 years ago when he was driving for the Gadabouts, and Sally was driving for the Gadabout. Sally spent her whole time with the Gadabouts. Other stuff was put aside. So we cannot go in that direction again. We cannot do that. But that's why we hired Eric
That was why we hired him to begin with. That was part of the.
No.
So we didn't backfill
So
him?
if you change his other
No,
job.
when Brian was hired, part of his
That's when his
hirement.
job
No, I
was-
understand he was
was-
hired, but if he was promoted, then he needs to be
Brian's
backfilled.
job,
Right,
be
right, and then
backfilled.
another
Right.
opportunity.
Brian is just Brian's background is a fill-in bus driver, not a designated gadabouts driver. He's a fill-in when we can't find anybody else.
So Eric
He's a
was out
fill-in.
for October, so Brian obviously was going to fill in, or he should have filled in, right? Is that what we're saying?
Brian cannot do that role anymore because his new role is athletic supervisor.
It's not his
which
job
is
anymore.
That's
He's been
not his
promoted.
job.
We
We
get
cannot
that.
spend all those hours with Brian.
So,
Driving the bus, like tomorrow, Eric is going tomorrow. They're going to Boone, 8 to 5 o'clock. If that was Brian, we could not pull Brian off that job from 8 o'clock to 5 o'clock tomorrow.
But
When
that's
we
not the
got games.
gadabout's problem, though. I mean.
That's exactly right. It
Well,
wasn't their problem.
That's what I don't understand. I mean, I understand the fact that, Brian has a skill and it's important to keep him there. But if you're going to promote a person to like another job, I think as Brett said, who is the backfill person? I mean,
And if Eric's not available, then
I
we need
agree
to
with
reach
you
out to
on
somebody
that.
else.
After the Brian, yes, definitely. But it seems to be, I mean, it's.
But that is something that we're gonna
I
be doing. We're
think
gonna
this-
try to find out
So that's the
another
next-
driver to help Eric. So this is gonna be another driver that we're gonna try to go out
Thank
and
you.
find.
That
And
makes-
it's also gonna increase our fees because
Well,
Eric
that's
is
between
making-
you and them, yeah.
Eric is making, I'll say $13 an hour. When we go out looking for a new bus driver, we're gonna be in the $17 hour range for a new bus driver.
All right, all
So
right.
we're gonna-
CMS just up there.
I'm
so
just telling you,
15.
Yeah,
you.
CMS is 15.
Do it.
Yeah, I'm just
And they
telling you.
can't even
what it is.
fill
When you
those
say do
positions.
it, we got a certain amount of money that we can spend. You say do it, yeah, do it.
Well-
Yeah, the money's gotta be there to do it. And that's gotta come from city council. I cannot raise the fees like that.
No,
I cannot do that.
I think
That's
the
not-
council will.
Yeah, that's not me. I cannot do that.
I think the argument here, and this is again personal because, I see sides of that too.
You're protecting your employee who works for
Exactly.
you, correct?
Right.
Exactly.
And
But I do think that, and I'll give you an example, like when I worked for Parks and Rec, I taught tennis lessons. That was part of my thing. When I left, there was nobody there. Nobody's gonna teach tennis lessons. So now there's, I think they promote maybe Belmont Tennis with Chris Jones or something like that. So this is what's happened. That person that was there, that person's no longer here. So they tried to do a fill-in, that didn't work, obviously, and Brian, can move on to another thing. But it doesn't mean that program gets,
Stopped.
it doesn't mean that.
Well,
My other thing is that as far as spending and things like that, I think it's worth what it, if it's $15 an hour and numbers times 8, I don't know what that is, but to me, the way they're seeing it is we've got money going here and here and here and there, and we want to complain about 24, whatever that number was, and I'm sorry if I'm not getting it right, $2,400. For them to go on trips for for a year or whatever or that was. So I think that's on they're saying, wow, you spent, they approved $4,000 for a sign last council meeting, but they did this and this, but you can't take this money aside and continue this program. I'm just telling
Some
from that
stopgap funding needs to be
perspective,
applied to-
that's what they're looking
Can
at.
I ask a maybe stupid question, just because I'm not familiar with the program or its intentions? When it was created 31 years ago, what was the intent? What was the original intent of the program? I just don't know.
Seniors on the go, I think.
Okay, so
So
it
it's
is.
really not lost.
The intent is
Seniors on the
trips.
go.
Whether
Trips.
that's.
They're gadabouting
Okay.
around.
Yeah, right.
And it's really not lost.
And that's one thing that we're looking at because the time has changed now. And from the CDC studies and all the other studies that are coming from all the different recreation departments in towns, they're promoting wellness. And the long story short, the gadabouts, we have senior programs for exercise and dance. Don't nobody attend. Don't nobody attend.
That's not the gadabout.
We got
That's
10
not the gadabout.
We got 10 people, but yeah, now all the resources are going for the gadabout.
$2,400?
It's more than $2,400.
It's
for the year.
$2,400.
No, it's more for the year.
The council worked it out. Doug Gadd at the last of the council meeting worked it out and said
It's more than that.
$2,400 a
It's
year.
not, that's incorrect.
I don't agree with you, but.
But you've
So
got a
tell me.
successful program.
Well,
related costs.
That's maintenance.
well, if you look,
That's under fleet now.
No, if you look, we're trying to, and I was thinking about is, I don't know how I came about, but they want me to provide a well-balanced program for all the citizens of Belmont, not just the gadabouts, for everybody.
Oh, I agree.
So that's what we're trying to do, and so I'm trying to put a program.
I don't
for
disagree with
everybody.
you on that. I really don't disagree with you on
And like I
that.
said-
But what's happened, you've got a very good program that's out there that's probably the benchmark of this county.
The county.
That now they just took it on the chin.
Well, let me go back to what our discussions was with the groups here tonight. It was very key about what he talked about, the last guy, not
Will
Carl, but the guy that's standing here. And it goes back to what the Hickory director said. I mean, they do programs with no charge to the citizens of Hickory. It just depends, are you doing this for your community, or are you doing it to make revenue? And that is a huge factor for me, in this master plan. You know, are we looking at things based on how much revenue they're gonna bring in, or are we doing things to provide for the community, period? And this, to me, is a program that provides to the community.
Yes, I
And
agree.
I understand expense, I do, but there's a choice there, and if the council says, hey, we want a revenue-based program, then yeah, okay, then we need to make that different, that change. But if it's for this specific area of the community, then
We don't know what we don't know yet.
Well,
And
yeah,
hopefully
we
the master
just
plan
don't
will
know.
tell us what the community wants. Do they want things paid for? Do they want things revenue-based and making a profit?
Right.
And then, you know, it will be easier to determine when Zip needs to protect his employee who doesn't do that job anymore because he's been promoted. And there's now this gap in this service that's been going on for 31 years. Who's responsible for filling that gap or making the call to kill the program? Or move to something
And I wouldn't
else?
say promote it. I mean, the recreation department has evolved. We have changed. We're doing a lot more things now than what we did 2 years ago when Sally and all of us here 30 years ago when the Gadabout started. I mean, we're stretched. We have a skeleton crew. We don't have this large recreation department that we can pull and then put, even the backup guy for Brian is at Public Works. We don't have backup people for those guys. When they leave or when they're sick, we don't have backup people. We're not a large department. We're very small.
But no, it's no doubt that the Parks and Rec, in the terms of the budget, you're at the bottom.
Yeah, we do a lot for what we do.
And Parks and Rec, to me, is the quality of, life issue. I mean, clearly, it's the function of a municipality to provide for the quality of the life for its, people. And you do that with Parks and Recs, or the police department, fire,
Right.
name it. So I agree with you, Zip, and with you and you and you, I think. But again, the seniors are an important part of us. But again, as you point out, or the width of the master plan, maybe we'll see. I mean, health and wellness of the programs are great, great. But you need to have a nice other place to have them, or you need to advertise them so most of the seniors know about them. But if you go out there, if you talk to any of the seniors, the KBB people, they don't know what Parks and Rec is actually doing because you don't have a marketing budget.
You need a marketing budget and the person
And you
to
don't
run
have
it.
that.
Well, there's not even a marketing person.
And all this stuff that has came out, all this stuff has came out, we're trying to reach out to more people now to
Yeah, I know
actually
you
get some more people in, so we are working on that.
You have a tough job.
That component of it. So right now, I'm in the situation trying to branch everybody together and keep everybody together, have programs for the gadabouts, have programs for everybody, and make it a well-rounded program. I was happened to be looking at the National Recreation Park magazine yesterday, looked in and saw my friend of Spartanburg County Parks and Recreation, and they were talking about the same thing we're talking about here. They got a well-balanced program. Their gadabouts are called the senior tripsters. Well, their senior tripsters, they play bingo, they walk at the parks, they exercise, they go on trips, they do all those things as a team. And that's what I'm trying to get. I wish we could get to that level.
Activity.
Well,
That
yeah.
activities for not just trips, for everybody, because we're talking about quality of life for everybody.
My problem, and I said this to Breer the other night when we had this, is that at some point we're going to have to come to some kind of compromise with these programs.
Right.
And what I'm afraid of is we're not going to come to a compromise. That's my biggest scare. And what'll happen is if we can't come to a compromise, what's going to happen is you've got, I forget the lady's name that started the knitting club, that now they can't get a facility, Kathy, that she can't get into the facility for the people to come to knit, so they go to a coffee shop they go to a coffee shop in Mount Holly.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? If we can't do something to keep this going and keep it vitalized, then guess who's gonna get Gadabouts? They're gonna go to Mount Holly. They're gonna go to where they can go.
I see what you're saying.
And what's gonna happen is, we're gonna fall behind Mount Holly. Mount Holly is nipping at our heels right now. They are nipping. And if we can't stay ahead of them, they're gonna pass us.
Well, let me say this. I did mention this to Mount Holly. All the recreation department know what everybody's doing. They do not want to be in our situation. And the reason why most recreation departments do not do a lot of trips is liability. That's why they not do them. That's why Gaston County don't do them. That's why Mount Holly don't do them. That's why these towns do not do trips. It's liability.
How much
Yeah, but you have
liability
liability
have
with kids on the soccer
I'm just
field.
telling you,
How many claims have you had?
I'm just telling you, call any of these departments.
lottery.
Doesn't matter.
I'm just telling you that's
Yeah.
I'm just telling you
That's why I was
that's the
surprised when I
aspect
heard
of
that
it.
it even existed.
I mean, a hip replacement.
You call any of those towns, that's what they're saying, liability issue.
Right.
I'm just being honest with you, that's what's out there. I'm
And I'm not disagreeing with you.
Yeah, I'm
And
not
we-
lying, I'm just telling you like it is.
And we're playing Russian roulette now with a bus that's 16 years
Right.
old and not ADA compliant.
And that's one thing, that's only one, so it's a lot of components to this, it's not just.
We have a process right now that is being held together by heroes, stepping up,
Right.
like when you were there,
Right.
teaching tennis, and when, people that have been promoted and they're off doing other things can't step up and leap into the occasion as the hero one more time, because being a hero is not a process.
Right.
And you can't run things in a way that's reliable for the people that want to use it when the hero falls down that day or can't make it, or something comes up and life happens. So we've got to find a new way to improve this process, because it's stretching people way too thin, and it's going to upset everybody eventually, because when, there's just no way to please everybody in this situation.
I mean, I love the gadabouts, I really do, I like for them to go on trips, but I want them to be safe, and I don't want to be,
Right.
like you said, a stress on the department, and everything is not necessarily
Right.
about the money.
So, I mean, and you just said you want them to be safe, and I do too. But yet, when I look on the Capitol and the bus is way down, and that's one of our best programs, why can't we get that elevated up? Why can't that be a number one? I mean, that's...
Well, so let me just tell you, in history with the CIP, you can keep moving it up, but the way I was explained to it last fall, and as you guys know, the thing with the tennis courts is that is simply a wish list. It is not by any means in the regular budget. So number one could even sit there.
Yeah,
2,
I understand that.
3 years.
Understand.
So I actually meant to say that earlier, even with the gadabouts here, is that, that's kind of a, we'll
It's out of
be
our
excited
control.
if something
Right.
actually, gets done off of that, so the second thing I want to say, and I want to get this wrapped up, but the things we're talking about here I want you to know, we understand you're doing a great job.
Yeah.
You have staff that are being pulled 100 different ways. That is a huge concern for me as this comprehensive plan comes out. Like, okay, how are we going to grow staff? I mean, that's a concern for me as well.
Yep.
And I know you guys are doing new things, which is great. You've got a lot of wheels turning. I'm just saying, for right this moment, until we get a kind of complete understanding what that future program would be like, is that can we keep this program moving along for a few more months? Is that possible? Or is that our recommendation to hand to council and say, okay, it's back on your plate to make that decision, yes or no? And then if they say yes, okay, then we can start the preliminaries and making any recommendations for a new program. If they say, no, we cannot continue these programs, then that will have to be pushed a little faster.
Okay, and everything she said is correct, but what we're trying to do is right now, the way we're going with this is, the availability of the bus driver is going to be the main component of this, because they can complain all they want to and say, well, all they want to, but it's coming down to the availability of the bus driver. The bus is available and everything, but it's going to come down to the part-time staff.
But as long as Eric's available, it's not going to be an issue.
So what we're trying to do now is, he could go on this trip tomorrow from 8 to 5, but he's not going to be able to do that in the future. So we're telling them, be back by 3:30. It's what we're trying to do now, 8 to 3:30 time frame right now. It's what we're trying to say, and it won't necessarily be on Wednesdays. So that's what we're trying to go with.
And I don't disagree with that at all.
Yeah, and so that's
If they
what we're
want,
doing.
if
So
they
we're
want to
not-
plan their trips, they should plan it around Eric's availability.
Right.
And then there is 2 hours out, 2 hours
So
back.
we're not saying we're taking away any trips, so we cancel any
Maybe we
trip.
should
it's
shorten
gonna be-
that up.
It's gonna be because of the bus drive, not on our part and not on their part. It'll be because of the availability of the bus, or if the bus breaks down.
Right, again.
So that's
but-
what we're trying to go with.
But have we provided them when Eric's available, though? Is that
And-
something
and
that
that's-
we've provided to them to say, hey, here's when Eric's available, here's the days and the hours that he's available, and you plan your trips around this?
Yeah, well, and one thing that the process gotta be changed, that I realized, this program, the trips that they put out is only, it doesn't give us enough time to plan ahead for these trips. Like, they meet once a month, and they give us this list, and it's already the next week's trip. So
Exactly, but what I'm,
So
I
we
guess
gotta
what
do
I'm
better
getting at.
planning, right, we gotta do better planning for the availability to Eric.
Exactly.
That's what I'm
If you
saying.
just come to them and say, hey,
Right.
look, here's when
Yeah.
Eric's gonna be available, and here's the hours, here's the days he's available.
And maybe
Can you
even
plan
say,
your trips around this?
yeah, and ask Eric, say, can you give me some days and times from now until the end of January? Maybe say that, and just say, then hand that to them.
And that's what we did. I was on the phone with him all day yesterday and today about tomorrow's trip. And he cleared his schedule to where he could make that work tomorrow.
I think if we're a little bit more,
Yeah.
from your side, if you're a little bit more proactive with the gadabouts, then I think that's kind of, maybe that's that olive branch that you're kind of handing to them, and then
Or
kind of put it
Dominique,
back,
or Dominique.
then put it back in their plate as to the
Yeah, we do
trips.
have a staff member that coordinates, and we're trying to work with them in doing that, with them. They do meet with them, and then they report back to me, or I can be there, either one, because most of the times, on those Thursdays, it's the same time I got a regular staff meeting. So but I do have a staff person on hand to be able to do that. But that's what we're trying to do right now. We're trying to work with them based on Eric's schedule and the availability of the bus. So we haven't canceled any trips or anything like that, unless the list of my boss or council directs me otherwise. So that's what we're working on right now.
Okay.
So on behalf of the board, I'm going to make this recommendation. I don't know if it's necessarily a motion at this time, but on behalf of our board, to send a letter to the council saying that this is what we've discussed. We've discussed that based on availability of the bus and the driver, to keep things as usual for them until we have the better idea of this future senior program.
The needs of this senior programming, based on the master plan.
Nice. All right, so
And subject
I'll
to the
make the
availability of the
motion then
driver.
that we
Yeah,
are going to
we do.
send a letter to the council based on our decision tonight.
Everybody in favor?
Yes.
Okay.
Here you go. All right, I'm going to mention one quick thing, and then we're going to adjourn. I've mentioned this earlier, and I just, guys, want you to just start thinking about something. I've talked to several kids. You know, I see lots of kids that come through our office, and I've talked about soccer tryouts that have been going on this week. Talked to a young lady with volleyball tryouts. I really, again, talking about staff, I really wish, and I can talk to Brian and Alex a little more one-on-one about this, but I really wish that we could figure out how to partner with these kids. I mean, there are like 78, 80 kids going out for volleyball. They pick like 14. Same thing with soccer. I just want to make sure that those kids have a place to go, that they're, you know, and basketball, I talked to a young man that went out last year. He said there was like 110 kids that went out for Belmont Middle basketball, and they keep like 14 kids. So I want to think in that direction. I've given you an example of a neighbor of mine with high school. Even at the high school level, I just want us to start, how can we figure out that partnership? And
But that is
just
great.
start.
Basketball signups, have they started?
Yeah,
yet?
they already started.
So what we need to do from the optimist point of view, we got all those kids down there. We got over 100 and some odd kids. You got the cheerleaders down there too. So some nights we're 150 kids down there.
Okay.
Is, hey, look, basketball signed up, and let's get them funneled into the Parks and Rec. I mean, it's not going to be hard. It's just a matter of us talking to everybody, say, hey, parents, hey, basketball signed up with Parks and Rec. If you want to get with Parks and Rec, let's get signed up. They're taking them now. I mean, I can be Optimist Club can be a better advertisement for you guys, because we got so many
Okay,
kids in
we can get
football.
together on that, that sounds great. Well, one thing that has come up though, is, dealing with the schools, that now right now with some of the practices can't start till 8 o'clock. They booted us out,
Yeah.
moved that time up, so now we're not in that facility till 8 o'clock, so only one team can practice right now.
For middle school, South
Yeah.
Point won't let you have the auxiliary gym yet?
Not yet, huh?
Well, I understand that, that's a whole separate
Yeah,
issue.
that's a whole separate
My just passion for these last
Yeah,
about year
I
or
wish
so
we could provide, like you said, that would be
is to
great.
somehow partner and grab these kids.
What
I
she's
just
talking
don't know
about,
where they're going.
that's something that's needed, what she's talking about.
Oh, 100%, whether
Having the
it's
facilities available.
baseball, whether it's
Yeah.
whatever it
Right.
is. Because
Well, and it
Yeah,
could
it
be,
is.
and it could be that we even can alter this particular age, like if basketball season for Parks and Rec at so many ages starts in December and goes through like mid-February, I don't know exactly when the basketball cuts are, but even if we adjusted that age group to fit in, that the cuts come when
That
that,
would be in January.
yeah.
that's
So I mean,
what's-
it's just something to think about. I wanted to kind of keep, we were gonna get out of here in like 2 or 3 minutes.
Yeah,
But, it's just a huge pull. So I'm making the motion to adjourn.
I'll second that. Thank you. Ready to not be in this hot room.
Absolutely.
There you go.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
Appreciate everybody, y'all did good.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you for dinner.
Yes, thanks again for dinner.
Yeah.
thanks for that, appreciate it.
Yeah, everything was.
I'll let you scoot past me. Sorry.
Appreciate it, man.
No, I'm gonna, well, actually, I can go around. Thank you, though.
Good, man. Good, I appreciate everybody's input. Even hers. I just playing with you. Everybody did good. Yeah. Everybody input.